Chapter 1363. Yang City's city walls were basically made of mud bricks, but they looked very sturdy. The yellow and red mud bricks seemed rather hard. Although they had experienced the baptism of time, they only appeared a little mottled. The main body still looked very sturdy, exuding a rustic grandeur. "This isn't good," Tian suddenly said before Zhou Wen approached Yang City's gate. Zhou Wen was slightly taken aback as he turned to look at Tian. He saw her staring at Yang City's gate with a look of disgust. "Why isn't it good? Is there danger inside?" Zhou Wen was secretly alarmed. Tian was a goddess. If even a goddess found it dangerous, Yang City was probably more terrifying than he imagined. "No, I just feel that there's a detestable aura," Tian said after some thought. "Detestable aura? What do you mean exactly?" As Zhou Wen spoke, he carefully sized up Yang City. The architectural style of Sun City could be considered crude in this day and age. Most of the buildings were made of mud bricks. From the outside, one could vaguely see some wooden roofs, but they didn't look too exquisite. Most of them were very simple. Truth Listener's ability couldn't extend into Yang City, so it could only observe its exterior. The mud bricks were yellow with a tinge of red, and they had a faint fragrance. Zhou Wen took a careful sniff and confirmed that the faint fragrance came from the mud bricks and not from the wood. "Are you talking about the smell in the Earth City walls?" Zhou Wen asked Tian. He also felt a little uneasy, but if a calamity creature was really born in Yang City, he could only enter to take a look. Of course, the premise was that Tian was willing to enter. If even Tian wasn't willing to enter, Zhou Wen planned on returning. Zhou Wen didn't have the fearless sacrificial spirit to take the risk in a place that even God wasn't willing to step into. "No, there's something in the city that I hate," Tian said. "What exactly is it? Is it a creature or something?" Zhou Wen continued asking. "I don't know. Anyway, I don't like it." Tian looked at Yang City in disgust. From the looks of it, she didn't seem to want to take a second look. Tian only said that she didn't like it. This made Zhou Wen feel a little more at ease. Tian didn't like to look at it, but he carefully sized up Yang City again and again. Suddenly, Zhou Wen's eyes lit up. In front of the Earthen City gate was a piece of wood. Zhou Wen originally imagined that it was something like a flagpole, but when he looked at it carefully, he discovered that there was a small palm symbol carved on the wood. Finally found it. Zhou Wen had no intention of entering Yang City to begin with. Now that he had found a tiny palm symbol, there was no need for him to take the risk. All he needed to do was download Yang City and slowly grind dungeons. "Stand over there," Zhou Wen said as he pointed at the log. "What are you doing?" Tian looked over. There was only a piece of wood and nothing else. "I'll take a picture of you as a souvenir." Zhou Wen picked up his ordinary phone and snapped a picture of Tian. "What's a photo?" Tian asked in confusion. "It's to leave your appearance on the phone." Before Zhou Wen could finish his sentence, he couldn't continue. This was because his phone didn't capture Tian's appearance. "You use your terraform?" Zhou Wen asked Tian. "No." Tian shook her head. "That's strange. Why can't I capture your appearance?" Zhou Wen tried taking another photo, but the outcome was the same. It was as though Tian didn't exist at all. Apart from Tian, there was nothing else in the photo. "Why are you taking photos?" Tian looked at the photo taken on Zhou Wen's phone and roughly understood what a photo was. There are many reasons. Most of them are because of the desire to retain beautiful memories. For example, when you encounter beautiful scenery, you want to take a photo so that you can see it in the future. Or it's something very memorable. For example, when a baby is young, parents will take a photo of him. When he grows up, he can still see what he looked like when he was young. Or perhaps it's lovers who take a photo of each other. When they have no choice but to separate and miss each other, they can see each other's photos. Zhou Wen explained. "So that's how the photo is. Then take another photo for me." Tian seemed somewhat interested. Zhou Wen took a few more photos of Tian, but the outcome was the same. No matter how he took them, Tian's appearance couldn't be retained. Zhou Wen took the opportunity to take a photo of the tiny palm symbol with his mysterious phone before putting it away and letting it slowly download the dungeon. Tian seemed to be trying as well, attempting to be photographed, but it didn't work at all. Even if she converged her strength, she still couldn't be photographed. I remember now. Ghosts can't be photographed. Tian wanted to try again, but Zhou didn't want to take any more photos. He hadn't planned on taking photos of Tian to begin with. He was just afraid that Tian would be interested in his photo of the tiny palm symbol and confuse him. No, I have to take a photo. Tian was excited as she got Zhou want to give her the phone. She wanted to take a photo herself. Zhou thought to himself, thankfully, I was afraid that my phone would break, so I placed quite a number of phones in the chaos space. He gave a phone to Tian. When Tian watched Zhou when operated, she had already learned how to take photos. She let the phone hang in the air and took a photo of herself. There's no need to go through so much trouble. Your phone has a front camera. All you need to do is switch to selfie mode. Zhou walked over and taught Tian how to use the phone to take a selfie. Tian naturally learned it immediately, but the photos she took still couldn't show her body. Zhou waited for a while and saw that the dungeon hadn't been downloaded. He planned on returning first. He still had to go to the divine capital. But before he could persuade Tian, he saw a figure quickly coming towards them. Thank the heavens. I've finally found you, young Masterwan. Adjutant got me to look for you. He said that there's something for you to return immediately. The person was an officer. He was extremely fast, and under his military cap was a pair of wolf ears. He had probably used a wolf-type mythical serum to advance to the mythical stage. Something happened in Luoyang. Zhou was alarmed. No, Adjutant told me to tell you not to worry. Nothing's wrong at home, but you have to return immediately. He has something important to discuss with you, the officer said as he panted. Without any hesitation, Zhou turned around and left. And Sheng knew why he was here, but he had sent someone to look for him in such a hurry. Clearly, the matter was very urgent. When Zhou rushed back, the hermit, cave era, and company were already in the divine capital dimensional zone. Furthermore, they were rather deep inside. Director General Wei, it's up to your bureau next, the hermit said to Wei Gu, who was standing beside him, in front of a strange building that resembled a huge tower. Chapter 1364. Act according to the plan. Wei Gu ordered expressionlessly. Yes. A few sensors from the bureau carefully walked towards the tower. The hermit and cave era watched from the side the entire time. Only after the sensors entered the tower did cave era look at Wei Gu and say, Chief Wei, those should be the capable subordinates of the bureau, right? If they were to die here, the bureau's losses would probably not be small. Wei Gu said respectfully, Your Excellency, you're overthinking things. As in censor, we have to have the awareness of sacrificing our lives for the Federation. Furthermore, I'm very confident in my subordinates. They will definitely return safely. Cave Era and the hermit exchanged looks and didn't say anything else. In fact, they knew very well that it was impossible for the censors to return. They were sacrifices to begin with. Only by sacrificing them could the plan continue. Wei Gu also knew this very well, but in order to advance his guardian, he would rather send his subordinates to their deaths. Furthermore, he didn't even blink. It was as though the deaths of his subordinates were no different from the deaths of ants in his eyes. Cave Era found it difficult to understand why such a cold, selfish, and cruel fellow could make all the censors follow him so loyally and obey his orders. Not long after, they heard a shrill scream coming from the tower. A strange light lit up at the top of the strange tower. It's finally here. The hermit looked at the light at the top of the tower as a hint of excitement flashed in his eyes. Is that the legendary heaven? Wei Gu narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself as he looked at the gradually glowing tower. The hermit nodded and said, That's right. That's indeed heaven. That empress used it to sense heaven and man. It's said to be the place closest to heaven. Some people also call it the Towering Pagoda. Wei Gu stared at heaven and continued asking, According to what I know, that empress was only an ordinary human. No matter how noble her status was back then, she shouldn't have become an immortal-like existence, right? The emperor of the mortal world indeed doesn't have the right to become a legend, much less a calamity-grade existence after death. Hermit paused for a moment before saying, "However, the one in heaven isn't that empress." Not the empress? Wei-Ge was slightly taken aback as his face was filled with confusion. Both fairies' capital and heaven were unique to the empress. It was hard to believe that the owner of this place was not her. Other than her, who else had the right to be the king of the fairies' capital and occupy heaven? As the two of them spoke, the light in the heavenly hall grew brighter and brighter, almost enveloping the entire heavenly hall. The hermit was in a good mood as he stared at heaven and explained, "No matter how strong a human is, they are at most legendary or epic. It's impossible for them to advance to the mythical stage." The empress was also a human, so she was naturally no exception. Furthermore, even if she became a mythical, she wouldn't have been able to live until now, much less advance to the calamity grade. When Wei-Ge heard the hermit's words, he looked at the light in heaven and seemed to think of something, but he had no intention of saying it out loud. When the hermit saw Wei-Ge's expression, he knew that he had guessed something. So he said, "Since you've already thought of something, tell me. Let me see if you're right." Wei-Ge pondered for a moment and said, "I heard that there's a Buddha statue in Dragon Gate Grotto called Lushna Buddha. It's carved according to the empress's face." When the hermit heard Wei-Ge say that, he immediately laughed. "You're indeed a smart person. Lushna means illumination, and the name that the empress gave herself has the word Lushna. It's basically the same as Lushna's meaning. So, is there really a Lushna Buddha in heaven?" Wei-Ge's expression changed slightly. If the one in heaven was really Lushna Buddha, it would be truly terrifying. Buddhas had 3 bodies, and Lushna Buddha was one of them. His name was Sambhogakaya, and he was a Buddha of absolute truth and wisdom. In other words, Lushna Buddha and the well-known Sakyamuni Buddha were a trinity of Buddhas. They could be considered one of the top Buddhas in Buddhism. Buddhas have benevolent hearts. If it's really Lushna Buddha, why would there be a need to use living people as sacrifices? Wei-Ge felt that there were some loopholes in the hermit's words. Have you never heard of the saying that Buddha is born from the heart, Director General Wei? The hermit continued, "The so-called Buddha is a mirror. However, this Buddha mirror doesn't reflect a person, but the heart. If your heart is good, then Buddha is good. If your heart is evil, then Buddha is 100 times more evil than you. Whether you're a Buddha or a devil is actually a matter of a single thought," Wei-Ge said in enlightenment. "So, if this calamity creature is born safely, then he might be a kind Buddha and won't cause too much disaster." "That's right," the hermit said with a smile. "That's naturally not what I want to see. That's why I got you to bring him here, so that he won't become a kind Buddha. I need him to become a terrifying devil." As the two of them spoke, the Buddhist light in heaven was already so intense that they couldn't look at it directly. They heard the sound of a door as though someone had walked out of heaven. Wei-Ge focused his eyes and realized that the person who came out was a bhikkhuni wearing a white monk robe. She walked over step by step as though she was accompanied by pure moonlight. She didn't look like the devil that the hermit had mentioned. "She doesn't look like a devil," Wei-Ge said as he looked at the bhikkhuni. "Of course not. If she's already a devil, we won't be able to escape death," the hermit said indifferently. "But when she walks out of the divine capital, she will definitely become a devil." "Why is that?" Wei-Ge was even more puzzled. "Because you are here," the hermit laughed. "Me?" Wei-Ge was slightly taken aback. "Yes, you. If your heart is like Buddha, then Buddha will always be present. If your heart is like a devil, then the devil will naturally descend into the world. For someone like Chief Wei, who has a heart like a devil, she will definitely become a devil if her heart is in sync with that bhikkhuni," the hermit said as he looked at Wei-Ge. "What do you need me to do?" Wei-Ge asked. "You don't need to do anything. You just need to let her see you after she leaves the divine capital." Seeing Wei-Ge's confused expression, the hermit smiled and said, "Don't you understand? Then don't bother thinking about it. You will naturally understand when the time comes. Let's wait for her outside the divine capital." The cave era had already activated the power of time and brought Wei Gu and the hermit out of the divine capital. As for the bikini, she was still slowly walking forward. Wherever she passed, the ancient soldiers that resembled humans and ghosts returned to dust as though they had been freed. Chapter 1365. Chief Wei, go ahead. As long as you are in Luoyang, Luoyang will become a dead city. No one will be able to escape. Everyone will feel the brilliance of Buddha and be sent to the pure land of paradise, the hermit said to Wei Gu as he looked at the ancient soldiers crawling out of the ground. Although I'm very willing to sacrifice my life for the Federation, I still wish to leave behind a useful body and dedicate my life to the Federation and you. Therefore, I still hope to return alive. Wei Gu didn't move at all. The hermit knew that if he couldn't convince Wei Gu, it was impossible for him to take such a risk. Therefore, he explained, those censors who dedicated themselves to Buddha are your men. You were also the one who ordered them to enter heaven. Using them as sacrifices to awaken the bhikkhunis had already been contaminated by their obsessions. Although they had yet to reach the point of becoming demons, they had already buried a fuse. As for you, you're the one who can ignite that fuse, and you're also the one attached to that obsession. So as long as you are in Luoyang, that bhikkhuni will definitely go to Luoyang. Once she sees you, she will feel that you are a sinful person. Becoming a demon is inevitable. Of course, you don't have to worry. I've already prepared a path of retreat for you. When bhikkhuni becomes a demon, it'll be the time for you to retreat, said the hermit as he looked at Cave Era. Cave Era took out a pocket watch and handed it to Wei Gu. This is a time pocket watch I made. After bhikkhuni becomes a demon, you can use it to directly return to the time and place I set, which is the headquarters of our League of Defender. Thank you, Lady Cave Era. Wei Gu solemnly put away the pocket watch. Go. When I return to headquarters, I'll help your Balrog advance to the Terror Grade. Your future achievements will be limitless, said the hermit. I still have to thank the two of you for your promotion. Then this subordinate will go now. After taking a few steps, Wei Gu suddenly turned around and said, Your Excellency, are there any taboos when using this pocket watch? I'm afraid I'll use it wrongly. If you're worried, you can give it a try, Cave Era said calmly. Please guide me, Your Excellency. Wei Gu was very careful. How could he be careless when it came to matters of life and death? The Cave Era told him the detailed usage method. Wei Gu pressed it and his body immediately vanished. After a few seconds, his figure appeared again. His Excellency's time powers are indeed miraculous. He can travel thousands of kilometers in an instant. It's as though he has the help of a god, Wei Gu praised. If there's no problem, go quickly. The bhikkhuni is about to come out, Cave Era said with a cold expression, as though she was unhappy that Wei Gu didn't believe her. Wei Gu knew that she was unhappy, so he didn't court a rebuff. He bowed and headed towards Luoyang City. You were right. This person is too cautious. Thankfully, the time pocket watch I gave him was real. Otherwise, it would have been troublesome, Cave Era said after Wei Gu vanished from Luoyang City. Is there a problem with the pocket watch? The hermit asked. No problem. Everything is under my control. Without my power to activate it, the time pocket watch is useless. It's useless for him to have it. Besides, it can let me know where he is. Cave Era hesitated for a moment and said, Why must he die? Although such a person is very annoying, he is indeed very useful. If he doesn't die at the hands of the bhikkhuni, how can the bhikkhuni truly become a demon? The hermit said indifferently, He's just a dog. As long as we are willing, there will be more people who are willing to stand in his position and work for us at any time. Furthermore, he's too ambitious. Such a person isn't suitable to stay in this position for long. Otherwise, the Bureau will become his private property. Don't tell me we have to discuss with him when we need the Bureau in the future. Cave Era thought about it and agreed. From this operation, it could be seen that Wei Ji's title of Queen Bee wasn't groundless. Those censors were almost obedient to Wei Gu. They even disobeyed them on the surface. Without Wei Ji's orders, it would be difficult for them to do anything. Not only have we dealt with the infamily in Luoyang, but we can also reshuffle the Bureau and replace it with our own people. It's killing two birds with one stone. We should celebrate later, the hermit said with a smile. As the two of them spoke, the bhikkhuni had already walked out of the underground city. The moment she walked out, a large number of dead people crawled out of the ground in Luoyang. Luoyang city was immediately in chaos. The ancient soldiers outside could still resist, but many ancient soldiers suddenly crawled out from beneath their feet. It immediately threw the Sunset Army's formation into chaos as they fell into melee combat. Instantly, the battle situation became extremely tragic. Just as the hermit had expected, Bhikkhuni headed for Luoyang City as though she was pursuing Wei Ji's whereabouts. Wherever she passed, the dead people who crawled out of the ground would transform into Buddhist light and rise into the sky. All of their faces revealed looks of relief, as though they had been liberated. However, the living people near her weren't affected. Upon seeing this scene, the soldiers and experts guarding the city were overjoyed. They imagined that reinforcements had arrived. The current bhikkhuni will only redeem the dead, but after she becomes a demon, she will redeem the living as well. I hope they will still be able to smile when the time comes, Hidden World said indifferently. If it weren't for the fact that Tianzua is too overbearing and doesn't know what's good for him, he wouldn't have implicated the people of this city, Cave Era said with a sigh. A general success is built on the bones of thousands. Fate has never been one's own. If they want to blame someone, they can only blame themselves for following the wrong person, the hermit said coldly and emotionlessly. Bhikkhuni walked towards Luoyang step by step. A large number of ancient soldiers were redeemed. When she arrived outside Luoyang City, people thought that their savior had arrived. They opened the door and wanted to welcome Bhikkhuni in. Humans are just that ignorant, the hermit said with a strange expression. Bhikkhuni entered the city. A large number of dead people crawled out of the ground and were redeemed by her power. The pressure immediately lessened. Although the power of those dead people wasn't enough to destroy Luoyang, they were everywhere and could appear from anywhere. It affected ordinary people greatly. Even someone as powerful as Li Xian couldn't take care of the entire Li family. Many dead people crawled out from under the floorboards in the house. He couldn't blow up the Li family with one punch, right? Furthermore, there were many people from the Li family fighting the dead. As for Bhikkhuni's power, she could ignore everything. She could directly purify the dead, but the living weren't harmed at all. Be happy. The more happy you are now, the worse you will cry later. The hermit snorted coldly and asked Cave Era, "Where's Wei Ge?" Towards the back. Cave Era sensed the pocket watch's location. Why did he run so far? The hermit frowned slightly. He doesn't dare get too close to the overseer's office. He's afraid of being discovered. It's good to be careful lest he is discovered and chased out, Cave Era said. The two of them could only watch as Bhikkhuni walked through the streets and redeemed a large number of dead people. She walked faster and faster, and her strength became stronger and stronger. She was almost about to complete her transformation. Chapter 1366. After Bhikkhuni's trip, most of the dead in Luoyang City had been expiated. The remaining scattered corpses that were further away and hadn't been expiated were no longer too dangerous. "We're almost there," Cave Era said to the hermit after sensing the time pocket watch's location. The hermit's eyes were filled with excitement, as though he was looking forward to seeing Bhikkhuni become a demon. Seeing that Bhikkhuni had already reached Wei Ji's location, Bhikkhuni, who had been walking forward, suddenly stopped. "It's coming." The hermit's heart beat rapidly as adrenaline surged. He was so excited that his palms turned moist. Suddenly, Bhikkhuni turned around without any warning and walked back in the direction he had come from. "What's going on? Isn't Wei Ge there?" The hermit was slightly taken aback as he hurriedly asked Cave Era. "He should be there. The time pocket watch is there." Cave Era felt that something was amiss. "No, he's not there," the hermit said with certainty. He kept looking around, but he didn't discover anything. As for Bhikkhuni, he was getting faster and faster. He had already rushed out of Luoyang and was heading straight for them. "Wei Ge, come out. I know you're here," the hermit shouted with a frown. "Since you know where I am, come over yourself." Wei Ji's voice sounded from behind them. The hermit's body was like a phantom as he shot out a cold beam. The cold beam shattered the forest, but he didn't see Wei Gu. Lord Hermit, this is your fault. You actually treated your own people like this. From the looks of it, I should give you the title of Queen Bee. Wei Ji's voice sounded from another place. This time, Cave Era used time acceleration to arrive there, but she still didn't see anyone. The hermit and Cave Era looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. It was impossible for Wei Gu to have such an ability. His contracted guardian, Balrog, was a fire elemental power. Its explosive strength was very strong, but it shouldn't be good at speed. Balrog, come out, the hermit shouted coldly. Balrog was a guardian of the League of Defender. He was a member of the League of Defender. Even if Wei Gu wanted to betray them, Balrog would still accept orders. Without Balrog, Wei Gu was nothing. Are you looking for it? Wei Ji's voice sounded again. However, this time, he walked out from behind a boulder. He stretched out a hand, his fingers pointing towards the sky. In the center of his palm, there was a mysterious flame dancing. The appearance of the flame actually seemed to be that of an enchanting woman dancing, dangerous and mysterious. Terror Grade? Hermit and Cave Era's expressions changed when they saw the flames. Wei Gu had already advanced Balrog to the Terror Grade. This was originally impossible. Balrog's flaw had yet to be resolved. Flame Demon, what are you doing? Terminate the contract with Virgo immediately. Cave Era still wanted to order Balrog, but Balrog didn't react at all. It continued twisting in Wei Ji's palm like a dance. There's no need to shout. Why do you think I chose a mythical Balrog? It's not because she'll be strong in the future, but because that's the only way I'll have a chance to control her. I like to be able to control everything, Wei Gu said calmly. Unfortunately, you have done something dangerous that you can't control. As the hermit spoke, a folding fan appeared in his hand. With a flick of the folding fan, a fan-shaped beam shot at Wei Gu. Wei Ji's fingers retracted as the flames in his palm shattered, transforming into a purple flame that enveloped his body. At that moment, the beam had already arrived in front of him. Beams of light shot into the purple flames, blasting open huge holes in the human figure inside. However, he didn't hear Wei Ji's tragic cries. Soon, the purple flames returned to human form. It was like a flowing purple flame robe that was draped over Wei Ji's body. The first impression that flames give off is heat and explosion, but that's not all of it. Flames also have a gentle side. As Wei Gu spoke, Cave Era had already used time acceleration to appear in front of him. She used her hands and feet and repeatedly struck Wei Gu with her Terror Grade strength. Wei Ji's body swayed like fireworks as he dodged Cave Era's extremely fast attacks. As for the attacks that couldn't be dodged, they struck Wei Ji's body, causing the flames to sway before quickly returning to their original state. Wei Gu seemed to be dancing a gorgeous tango in the flames. The combined attacks of the hermit and Cave Era failed to injure him at all. The flames were like nothingness and didn't have any strength. Any force that struck him could only cause the flames to circulate, unable to injure his body. I only take the nothingness of fire, not its explosion. I do the opposite of the world. Even you can't injure me, who is transformed into nothingness, Wei Gu said calmly. Why did you betray us? The hermit knew that he had to finish off Wei Gu before Big Huni arrived. Otherwise, once Big Huni arrived and approached Wei Gu, he would become a demon. When that happened, even they wouldn't be able to escape death. The time pocket watch you gave me can't save my life, Wei Gu said. If you betray us because of this, we can have a good talk. Now that you have the capital to talk to us, you can naturally receive the treatment you deserve. The Alliance will still need talents like you in the future, said the hermit. I'm only telling you that I know about this, but that's not what I care about. Wei Gu directly rejected the hermit. Then why? Cave Era couldn't help but ask. She originally imagined that Wei Gu had betrayed her because he knew of her plan. Wei Gu looked up at the starry sky and said, because from the beginning, I'm just a devil who wants to destroy devils. Haha, you're just too funny. Haven't you had enough human blood on your hands? Are you telling me that you're actually a good person? The hermit laughed. Wei-Gu said indifferently, "I've never been a good person. I'm just a devil who likes to play games with devils. Now it's time to end this game." "You're right. It's time to end this game." The hermit took a step forward, and the surrounding mountains, forests, and rivers suddenly lit up. The natural substances of the mountains, rivers, wind, and fire formed an array formation similar to the 8 trigrams. "Do you think I'll come to Luoyang without any preparations? I originally left a backup plan to deal with Tianzhua and Zhouwan, but now you have to bear it. Everything in the world is in my myriad 8 trigrams array. Even if your body dissolves into nothingness, there's no rootless fire in the world. That mere flame of yours can't escape my myriad 8 trigrams array. Only destruction awaits you." With the hermit's voice, the surrounding mountains and rivers lit up. The power of everything surrounded Wei-Gu from all directions. Have you ever heard of a spark that can start a prairie fire? The flame robe on Wei-Ji's body fluttered like a purple bonfire that soared into the night. It was beautiful and dangerous. Chapter 1367. The flames on the gauze robe transformed into butterflies that danced out. Anything that was tainted by the flames, all the mountains, rivers, and forests, burned. Instantly, everything around them turned into a world of purple flames. The flaming forest, flaming rivers, and flaming mountains, everything was ignited. The original myriad 8 trigrams array had now turned into a pure fire array. The hermit's expression changed drastically. He tried to stop the myriad 8 trigrams array, but he realized that it was useless. The endless energy brought by the burning myriad 8 trigrams array made it impossible to stop the mutated myriad 8 trigrams array. Seeing that Bikuni was approaching, the hermit and cave era tried to charge out, but they realized that they were trapped in the myriad 8 trigrams array. They couldn't charge out. They had truly fallen into a trap of their own making. Didn't you say that the myriad 8 trigrams array contains everything in the world? Your powers are naturally included, so you can't leave. Don't you remember what you said? Wei-Gu said with a smile. Wei-Gu, why aren't you retracting the power of the flames and escaping? When that Bikuni becomes a demon, the first person he'll kill will be you, said the hermit. Have you seen a demon that's afraid of death? It's a form of happiness for me to have the two of you die with me, Wei-Gu said nonchalantly. Bikuni was already close. The hermit and cave era couldn't afford to waste time. They attacked Wei-Gu with all their might, hoping to break through the array and escape. However, Wei-Ji's void flames didn't focus on powerful explosive strength. Instead, they focused on burning and nothingness. They took an unconventional approach and achieved an extreme effect. If it was a fair battle, Wei-Gu might not be able to defeat Cave Era, but it wouldn't be easy for them to injure him. Furthermore, they didn't have time. Cave Era and the hermit were shocked and furious. They shouted, Wei-Gu, why aren't you releasing the array? Do you really want to die together? What good does it to you to perish together? I'll tell you a secret regarding Flame Demon. It'll give your Flame Demon a real chance to advance to the Calamity Realm. Open! The veins on the hermit's forehead bulged as he roared. However, Wei-Gu remained unmoved. He was like a fiery butterfly fluttering in the world of flames. No matter how terrifying the hermit and cave Era's attacks were, they couldn't injure him at all. At that moment, Bikuni finally walked into the array. The flames of the array couldn't even touch her monk robes. She walked all the way as if she wasn't tainted by the flames of the mortal world. It's over. The hermit and cave Era's hearts sank. However, Wei-Gu remained as calm as ever. He transformed into a flowing flame and arrived near Bikuni. Come. It's also an extremely gratifying thing to be able to have the honor of causing a Buddha to degenerate into a demon. Wei-Gu spread his hands and waited for Bikuni to become a demon. He was like a demon lord who was raising demons with blood. The hermit and the cave era were terrified. Even they could not completely suppress their fear of death. Bikuni was a calamity-grade existence. If she became a demon here, it would be difficult for them to escape death. They wouldn't even have a chance to escape. However, In the next second, Bikuni's actions left everyone dumbfounded. Wei-Ge froze. Bikuni looked at Wei-Ge and calmly sat down. She slowly closed her eyes as her body emitted a Buddhistic glow. Her body gradually transformed into the appearance of a Buddha. The Buddhistic glow shone, and everything that encountered the Buddhistic glow returned to its original natural state. The flames extinguished, the trees bloomed, the river flowed, and greenery spread across the mountains. Flowers bloomed one after another. She is about to become a Buddha. The hermit was speechless. He really couldn't believe such a ridiculous thing. Bikuni didn't become a demon when facing a person like Wei-Ge, whose hand were covered in blood. Instead, she became a Buddha? No, impossible. Wei-Ge was dumbfounded himself. How could a person like him be someone who could make Bikuni become a Buddha? Even he didn't believe that he was a good person. More importantly, once Bikuni became a Buddha, she would have no lethality and wouldn't harm anyone. It was very likely that she would immediately tear through space and leave Earth. Without using Bikuni's strength, Wei-Ge was no match for Cave Era and the Hermit. All his plans were for naught. Wei-Ge gritted his teeth and rushed forward to burn Bikuni with flames. He wanted to use violence to make her degenerate into a demon. However, when his flames burned Bikuni's body, Bikuni's Buddhistic glow became stronger and stronger. Her body rapidly transformed into a Buddha's body. Become a F** king demon. Wei-Ge angrily punched Bikuni's face, but his fist was blocked by the Buddhistic glow on Bikuni's body. Bikuni had already transformed into a Buddha. She smiled and nodded at Wei-Ge. Then, amidst the Buddhistic glow, she slowly rose into the void and disappeared from Earth. The natural disaster that accompanied her also vanished. F***CK. Wei-Ge felt an indescribable feeling. He mechanically turned his head to look at Cave Era and the Hermit. He saw that the two of them were looking at him with killing intent and had already surrounded him. Would you believe me if I told you that this was a misunderstanding? Wei-Ge said bitterly. What do you think? The Hermit stared coldly at Wei-Ge and blocked his escape route. Cave Era stood in front of Wei-Ge with an extremely unfriendly expression. If not for an accident, their lives would have been ruined by Wei-Ge. Commissioner Wei, I really underestimated you in the past. However, don't worry. This time, I will definitely do my best to send you where you want to go. The Hermit's expression was gloomy as a strange glow circulated around his body. The power of his terror transformation had already been pushed to its limits. Wei-Ge lamented inwardly. The heavens really want me dead. To think I wanted to win against the heavens by half a piece. In the end, I lost before I even reached the chessboard. There's no need to trouble the two of you to go where he wants to go. A figure appeared beside Wei-Ge. Zhou, the Hermit and Cave Era's expressions changed. You came the right time. I thought you wouldn't be able to make it in time. Wei-Ge finally heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Zhou. As Wei-Ge had received the news too late and couldn't contact Zhou, he had no choice but to think of a way to take the risk to send a message to Ensheng. It was unknown if Ensheng believed him as the Wasp Queen. Whether he could contact Zhou was also a problem. He originally didn't hold much hope, but he never expected Zhou to really rush back. I've been back for quite a while. I saw how engrossed you were in your performance and couldn't bear to disturb you. So I watched for a while, Zhou answered. Wei-Ge looked at Zhou in a daze. Now, he had the urge to get the female Buddha to take Zhou away. One for each of us. You choose first. Zhou gripped the bamboo blade tightly and looked at Cave Era and the Hermit. I'm not a particular person, nor am I a gentleman. Leave beating up women to me, Wei-Ge said to Cave Era. All right, this is mine. Zhou walked towards Cave Era. Chapter 1368. Let's go, the Hermit said as he turned into a beam of light to escape. Did I say you could leave? Zhou didn't chase after him, as he said coldly. Before Zhou could finish his sentence, the Hermit stopped. The Hermit floated in midair with a look of horror. His left arm had been severed at the shoulder, and blood spewed out from the severed arm. When the severed arm fell from the sky, it was like tofu that had landed on invisible blades. When it landed on the ground, it had already turned into a pile of fragments. The reason why Zhou didn't come out immediately wasn't as simple as watching Wei Ji's performance. During that period of time, he had already used invisible sword beams to set up the minor heavenly cycle stellar array and sealed off the area. It was also thanks to the hermit's good luck that the first hit was his arm. If his head had hit it, he would have been split in half. He wouldn't even have a chance to react. The hermit didn't dare move because he didn't know where the silent, invisible sword beams were. Rushing over rashly was no different from sending himself to his death. Cave Era's figure flashed as she wanted to approach the hermit and use the power of time to return to the League of Defenders headquarters. Your opponent is me. Purple flames flew over like butterflies that filled the sky, sealing off Cave Era's path. Wei Ji's swaying flame-like figure also arrived behind Cave Era. Previously, because he knew that he wasn't a match for Cave Era and the hermit, Wei Ge had only dodged and never taken the initiative to attack. Cave Era struck back. Under the effects of time acceleration, the palm was unbelievably fast. When it struck Wei Ge, it immediately pierced a hole in his body. However, Wei Ge only smiled slightly. Instead of retreating, he advanced as though he couldn't feel any pain. He arrived in front of Cave Era and reached out to grab her face. As for Cave Era's entire arm, it pierced through Wei Ji's body. Cave Era was alarmed instead of being happy. She quickly retreated, causing Wei Ji's extended palm to miss. Wei Ji's body was like a real flame. After Cave Era's arm retracted, his body automatically recovered. The flames flickered as though Wei Ge had really transformed into flames. Wherever a fire butterfly appeared, he could instantly arrive like a ghost. Unfortunately, the cave world's time powers couldn't be underestimated. Although Wei Ji's attack was strange, he ultimately failed to touch the cave world. Zhou, you have to think it through. Do you really want to be enemies with the League of Defender? Do you know how many guardians there are in the Federation? How many people want to have a guardian? As long as you're willing, you can become one of them and have a top guardian, the hermit said as he looked at Zhou, one with a gloomy expression. Guardian? What kind of guardian can you give me? Myth? Fear? Or a natural disaster? Zhou didn't move, but the invisible sword chi that formed the minor heavenly cycle stellar sword array around him had already been activated. It tore through the air and attacked Hermit. The moment the invisible sword beam moved, the air flow and the sound of air being torn apart gave Hermit a way to determine the situation. As he dodged and blocked the invisible sword beam, he said, "An expert like you naturally has to contract a top-tier grade guardian. It won't be difficult for you to advance to the calamity grade in the future." Zhou said indifferently, "I haven't even agreed to a contract with a calamity grade guardian. Do you think I want your terror grade guardian?" Hermit suddenly transformed into a stream of light and flew away. Instantly, he passed through the layers of invisible sword blades and arrived hundreds of meters away. Zhou, you're still too young. You don't know that the unknown is terrifying. You shouldn't have let those invisible sword beams circulate and let me know where they are. The next time we meet, it will be your death, the hermit said as he sped up. Just as Hermit finished speaking, he let out a tragic cry. His face seemed to have collided with an invisible blade as half of his facial skin was sliced off. As he couldn't dodge in time, a piece of his shoulder was sliced off. Blood gushed out like a fountain. "Continue," Zhou said to Hermit. Hermit's expression was livid. Before Zhou could take action, he was already seriously injured and his combat strength had been reduced by more than half. "Zhou, don't force me to risk my life." Seeing that Wei Ge was holding back Cave World and that he was unable to support him, Hermit knew that he was in a dire situation. "I've never seen anyone risk their lives. I want to see it," Zhou said unhurriedly. With a minor heavenly cycle stellar sword array trapping Hermit, he couldn't escape. Zhou now wanted to know how strong the 4 heavenly kings of the League of Defender were. "All right." Hermit's eyes turned ferocious as the guardian armor on his body emitted a demonic glow. Behind the armor, arms formed from armor grew out. In the blink of an eye, a wheel formed from more than 1,000 arms appeared behind Hermit. The palm of the arm was clenched. When the palm opened, one could see eyes growing in the palm. It looked extremely demonic and terrifying. Why does this fellow's guardian armor look a little like the one in myths and legends? Zhou looked at the guardian armor with a thoughtful expression. As for Cave World, who was fighting by the side, she was pleasantly surprised when she saw the changes in Hermit's armor. Hermit has actually reached such a stage without a sound. The Guardian has completely transformed into a terror form. He's just one step away from advancing to the Calamity Realm. Such a hermit gave Cave World a glimmer of hope. If Hermit could defeat Zhou, their plan today wouldn't be considered a complete failure. As Zhou was pondering over it, the strange light emitted from Hermit's body and condensed into a 1,000-armed and 1,000-eyed bodhisattva projection. The projection was hundreds of meters tall, and the light illuminated 50 kilometers. Even the distant Luoyang city could clearly see the terrifying projection. What's that? The legendary 1,000-armed and 1,000-eyed bodhisattva. Wouldn't that be? Then who's fighting? Everyone discussed. The terrifying might emitted by the 1,000-armed and 1,000-eyed bodhisattva projection made their hearts tremble. Should we support young Masterwan? And Shen couldn't help but feel worried when he saw that Hermit could unleash such terrifying power. There's no need, Long Zongjing said indifferently as he continued sitting in the city. As Hermit muttered incantations, the 1,000-armed and 1,000-eyed bodhisattva's mouth emitted faint sutras. Its palms held up the sky as its eyes emitted divine light. Wherever the terrifying divine light passed, everything was destroyed as though it was about to destroy the world. Zhou, go to hell. As the hermit roared, the 1,000 hands and 1,000 eyes aimed at Zhou. Instantly, divine light condensed, and a beam of light that resembled a blazing sun instantly appeared in front of Zhou. The dazzling light seemed to devour everything. Boom! Just as everyone was alarmed, they saw sword beams pour down like a silver river. Chapter 1369. Countless sword beams condensed into something corporeal, like a galaxy pouring down, colliding with the terrifying beam. Clang! 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 Like the sound of a steel nail stabbing into a wooden board, countless sword beams pierced through the beam and went against the flow, shattering the beam. Under the impact of the countless sword beams, the noble and terrifying figure that resembled a 1,000-armed and 1,000-eyed bodhisattva instantly shattered like glass. Under the impact of the countless sword beams, the hermit's body was drowned in the sword streams. Just as his scream came to an abrupt halt, his body and his guardian armor shattered and dissipated in the torrent. The terrifying bodhisattva figure vanished, leaving only the galaxy-like sword streams swirling around Zhou. They were resplendent like stars. Cave Era was alarmed. Such a terrifying attack was something she had never seen in her life at the Terror Grade. Even an immortal probably didn't have such terrifying destructive power. The Hermit's 1,000-armed, 1,000-eyed power was considered top-notch destructive power among the Terror Grade, but it was like tofu in front of Zhou wind sword streams. What terrifying power was this? Without any hesitation, Cave Era used the power of time and instantly vanished. She didn't dare stay here for another second. Zhou's minor heavenly cycle stellar array had already scared her out of her wits. One of the 4 heavenly kings, Hermit, is nothing much. Can't you last a little longer? Zhou said in disappointment. He didn't realize that the minor heavenly cycle stellar array wasn't just a one-on-one battle. It was equivalent to countless Terror Grade experts surrounding Hermit. It would be a wonder if Hermit could withstand it. Weiga looked at Zhou and couldn't help but shake his head with a bitter smile. He thought to himself, I thought that I've done extremely well over the years. Perhaps I'll have a chance to compete with this fellow, but I never expected him to have already reached such a stage. President, I really have to thank you this time. If it weren't for your timely news, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to rush back in time. Without you attracting the Bikunis to resolve the dead in the city, Luoyang would have suffered heavy losses. I wonder how many people would have died. Zhou still used the way he addressed Wei Gu in school and didn't address him by his current position. There's no need to thank me. I'm just doing what I want to do to satisfy my selfish desires. Saving people is just in passing. Wei Gu looked at Zhou Wen and asked, "You should be about to advance to the Calamity Realm, right? Natural disaster?" Zhou Wen was slightly taken aback before he shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "Ignoring Calamity, I don't even know how to raise my terror grade. You are still at the mythical stage?" Wei Gu was stunned as he looked at Zhou Wen in disbelief. Zhou Wen nodded. "I also want to advance to the terror grade, but I can't." Wei Gu looked at Zhou Wen with a strange expression. After a while, he sighed and said, "You advance to the mythical stage as a human?" Zhou Wen nodded again and said, "Yes, this path is too difficult. I'm just figuring it out. Continue walking. I'm starting to look forward to the day you advance to the terror grade." With that said, Wei Gu turned around and left. "Where are you going? Why don't you stay in Luoyang?" Zhou Wen invited. Wei Gu had helped Luoyang survive the calamity this time and completely severed ties with the League of Defender. It was too dangerous for him to return now. The League of Defender would probably not let him off. Wei Gu looked at the sky and said indifferently, "Devils can survive anywhere. It doesn't matter even if it's hell. Besides, I don't like sunlight. The sunlight here is too blinding." "The sunlight is blinding." Zhou Wen looked up at the sky. It seemed to be night. It was still cloudy. There wasn't even a moon. Zhou Wen still wanted to say something, but Wei Gu had already disappeared. Only the sparks from the flame robe had yet to completely dissipate, like fireflies. Zhou Wen shook his head. He realized a very serious problem. None of the students who came out of Sunset College in his generation seemed to be sociable. Apart from Mingxiu and Feng Xiuyan, who were relatively close, most of them were far apart from each other. None of them worked together. Luoyang's calamity finally passed safely, and Zhou Wen returned to Overseer's office. Tian also followed Zhou Wen to Overseer's office. Zhou Wen had no choice but to get Ensheng to take good care of her, but he couldn't let anyone touch her. However, Ensheng didn't take special care of Tian. He treated her like an ordinary guest. He didn't even prepare the dessert that Zhou Wen had asked him to prepare for her. When Zhou Wen asked Ensheng in puzzlement why he did this, Ensheng only told him that adding too much sugar won't make it sweet. Zhou Wen thought about it for a while before he felt that Ensheng's words were really interesting. Why didn't I see Ice Maiden and Yulian? Zhou Wen was somewhat puzzled as to why he hadn't seen them. However, there were too many things to do back then, so he didn't have the time to ask. They helped suppress Chess Mountain previously, but they have disappeared recently. They most likely entered Chess Mountain, Ensheng said. They still entered? Zhou Wen wasn't surprised. Ice Maiden wanted the demon god bloodline map, while Yulian wanted to enter to obtain Earth's strongest companion beast. It would be strange if they could keep to themselves. However, with their strength, they wouldn't be able to stir up any trouble in Chess Mountain. Now, Zhou Wen was afraid that the two of them would fall into the Thearka's hands. Forget it. Let them be. Zhou Wen couldn't be bothered too much now. Now, the most important thing for him was to advance to the Terror grade. He also had to master the infinite spatial circulation skill. Otherwise, it would be impossible to kill the Calamity grade in the Venus dungeon. Slaughterer, oh, Slaughterer, how are you going to advance? Zhou Wen had killed quite a number of high-level creatures, but he couldn't trigger Slaughtereur's growth. This made Zhou Wen suspect that it probably wasn't as simple as pure slaughter for Slaughterer to advance to the Terror grade. Since slaughtering doesn't work, I might as well change my train of thought. Zhou Wen felt that he had to find another way out. Tiantian's problem also gave Zhou Wen a headache. With such a time bomb by his side, no one knew when it would explode. It would be very troublesome when the time came. Should I give it a try and eat that lemon candy? Zhou Wen had long been tempted. It was just too difficult for him to advance. If that lemon candy could really allow him to advance, all the difficulties would be resolved. However, after some thought, Zhou Wen gave up on the idea. Firstly, Tian had always been by his side. If he took out the lemon candy, it was hard to guarantee that Tian wouldn't discover it immediately. He wouldn't even have the chance to eat it. Secondly, Zhou Wen had a nagging feeling that if he couldn't truly understand Slaughterer, it would ultimately be a latent danger even if he advanced to the Terrorgrade. Young Masterwind, Chancellor Lung invites you over, and Sheng knocked on the door and said from outside, "Why is Chancellor Lung looking for me?" Zhouwen opened the door and asked in surprise, "I don't know either. However, Chancellor Lung usually doesn't like people disturbing him. It's not easy for Overseer, his favorite student, to meet him. There's no harm in meeting him," and Sheng said. Zhouwen felt that Sheng was right, so he followed the address and Sheng gave him and went to Lung Zongjing's residence. Chapter 1370. Although Lung Zongjing had a residence on campus, the place Zhouwen went to wasn't on campus. Instead, he went to an inconspicuous yard in the old district of Luoyang City. The small yard was very ordinary. As the surroundings were very humid, moss grew at the base of the walls. There were also many plants that looked like creepers on the walls. The house inside was also a common red brick structure. Although it was very clean, it couldn't hide the traces of time. Some of the bricks on the walls were already showing signs of weathering. "Chancellor Lung, it's me, Zhouwen. Are you home?" Zhouwen knocked on the door. "Come in." Lung Zongjing's voice sounded from inside the house. When Zhouwen pushed the door open and entered, Lung Zongjing was carrying a pot of cactus out of the house. "Chancellor Lung, is this your home?" Zhouwen looked around the house and saw that the decorations inside were very outdated, but they weren't considered old. They gave off a mediocre and dilapidated feeling. This was very different from the feeling Lung Zongjing gave Zhouwen. Lung Zongjing was a person who looked and behaved like a noble. Furthermore, his life soul was a demonic organ throne that looked very grand. Therefore, it made people feel that Lung Zongjing was a person who paid attention to the quality of life and details. He shouldn't live in such a mediocre home. In this yard, Zhouwen couldn't see anything special. No matter how he looked at it, they were all household items. There were even many stalls. "I lived here when I was young. This is my grandfather's old mansion." Lung Zongjing placed the cactus to the side and patted the dust off his hands before continuing. "In the past, I didn't like this place very much. I always felt that I had to stand out and live in a beautiful house. I had to live like a person. However, I don't know when, but I suddenly felt that living here was more comfortable, so I moved back." "You should be returning to your roots, right?" Zhouwen asked. Lung Zongjing glanced at Zhouwen and curled his lips. "What do you mean by returning to one's roots?" "To put it bluntly, I've eaten too much braised pork and want to eat some vegetables to relieve my boredom. I haven't reached that stage yet. There are a lot of good things that I haven't tasted yet. I'm not tired of them yet." With that said, Lung Zongjing sat down on a wooden stool in the yard and continued while basking in the sun. "I've also thought about why I wanted to move back. In terms of comfort, this place definitely can't compare to any place I've lived before. In terms of convenience, this place isn't convenient either. Speaking of a quiet environment, this place couldn't compare to the villa I had bought before. He had to say that the neighbors here were good and friendly. Actually, that was not the case. There was no one here anymore. The old neighbors had already disappeared. Even if they're still around, I don't have a good impression of them. I don't like them from the bottom of my heart." "Then why do you like living here?" Zhouwen asked curiously. "I've thought about this for a long time. In the end, I confirmed that the reason I like living here is because I'm afraid," Lung Zongjing said. "Afraid?" Zhouwen was even more puzzled. In terms of safety, this place was far inferior to the school. There were no defenses at all. It was just a dilapidated old city district. Any Terrorgrade creature could reduce this place to ruins with one hand. "Yes, I'm afraid," Lung Zongjing said. "Everyone is afraid of death, but the degree is different. Some people rank their fear of death first, while others rank their fear of death second. Therefore, when they encounter certain things, they will appear unafraid of death. But in fact, there's no one who isn't afraid of death. It's just that he has encountered something more terrifying than death, so death isn't that important." As Lung Zongjing spoke, he took out a lighter and cigarettes from his chest pocket. He skillfully flicked out a cigarette and placed it in his mouth. He lit the cigarette and took a sip. He closed his eyes as though he was enjoying it. Zhouwen looked at Lung Zongjing in a daze. This was too different from the impression Lung Zongjing usually gave him. If he didn't know that this was Lung Zongjing, he would have thought that he was a decadent middle-aged uncle who liked to gamble and drink. After a while, Lung Zongjing closed his eyes and continued while basking in the sun. Later on, I thought about it carefully. My fear of death should be ranked third. Before death, there are two other things. If I encounter those two things and have a choice, I would rather choose death. The reason why you are here is because you are afraid that those two things will happen? Zhou asked. To his surprise, Lung Zongjing shook his head and said, "No, those two things have already happened." Zhou looked at Lung Zongjing in a daze, unsure what he was trying to say. Lung Zongjing continued, "In the past, I was very afraid that I would become like my parents, but now, I'm no different from them in essence. In the past, I was very afraid that grandfather would leave me. If that happened, I would be the only one left in this world, but that day still came. I live here because I'm afraid of being alone, but in fact, I've always been alone." Zhou didn't know what to say. He occasionally had some thoughts about what Lung Zongjing had said, but he didn't think as clearly as Lung Zongjing. However, looking at Lung Zongjing, Zhou felt that Chancellor Lung wasn't as difficult to get along with as he had imagined. Lung Zongjing took another puff of his cigarette and pressed the remaining half of it on the cement flower bed beside him. He extinguished the sparks and flicked it into the trash can. Living here gives me an inexplicable sense of security. I feel like this is my own little world. As long as I hide here, I don't need to worry about anything, nor do I need to worry about anything. As long as I sleep, it's as if all the bad things will disappear on their own. At this point, Lung Zongjing laughed self-deprecatingly. But in fact, nothing can be resolved. It's just deceiving myself. You can't say that. Everyone needs a pure land in their hearts to nurture and recover. Perhaps this place won't be of any substantial help to you in resolving your problems, but it can give you peace of mind. It can allow you to face those problems calmly. This is very important, Zhou said with a serious expression. You're right. As Lung Zongjing spoke, he suddenly stretched out his palm and pressed it against the wall beside him. The entire courtyard and house instantly collapsed, turning into fragments that rose into the air. What are you doing? Standing in the ruins, the rubble around him constantly rose. Zhou looked at Lung Zongjing in confusion, unsure why he was doing this. Amidst the rising fragments, Lung Zongjing turned around and left. As he walked, he said, "Just as you said, everyone has a pure land in their hearts to escape from. It's a place of fear that's closer to the heart than death. If one day you meet an enemy who doesn't fear death, then you should think about how to find the pure land that belongs to him. Kill and destroy the heart. Sometimes destroying the heart is scarier than killing the person. You're good at everything, but you're too kind. Sometimes kindness is a sin. Killing. Zhou stood in the ruins and watched Lung Zongjing's departing figure. There seemed to be some emotions surging in his heart. Chapter 1371. Zhou's talent was focus. This allowed him to have extraordinary single-mindedness. However, everything had its pros and cons. Zhou could quickly immerse himself in whatever he did. This made him learn everything faster than the average person, and it wasn't easy for him to be distracted. It was very difficult for him to be disturbed by other matters. On the contrary, because of his focus, Zhou's emotions weren't as rich as the average person's. He wasn't that sensitive. It was difficult for Zhou to sense some emotional things. In Zhou's understanding, defeating an enemy was similar to adding and subtracting. He only considered how much he lost and how much his opponent lost. In his calculations, killing an opponent was already the enemy's greatest loss. However, Lung Zongjing's words had opened up a new world for Zhou. It turned out that killing an opponent wasn't the opponent's greatest loss. Of course, this theory was only effective on a portion of people, or rather, it was effective on a certain person at a certain point in time. It wasn't an eternal condition. Killing someone's heart? Many thoughts flashed through Zhou's mind. He actually felt Slaughterer in his body respond, as though it was telling him that he had found the right path. Zhou looked in the direction Lung Zongjing had left with a complicated expression. Lung Zongjing had clearly seen through his problem during his battle with the hermit. He had called him over to let him understand this reason, although it was to enlighten him. What Lung Zongjing had said came from the bottom of his heart. Otherwise, he wouldn't have touched Zhou so much. From the fact that he had destroyed the courtyard before he left, he knew that Lung Zongjing wasn't telling a story, but something that had really happened to him. It was precisely because of this that he had to destroy the courtyard. Since he had said it, this weakness would be known sooner or later, so he definitely couldn't leave it behind. With this in mind, Zhou couldn't help but bow in the direction Lung Zongjing had left in. The courtyard was Lung Zongjing's final familial bond. It had been destroyed because of Zhou, so he didn't know how to repay this favor. Now, all Zhou could do was advance to the terror grade as soon as possible. How can I kill someone's heart? How can I know what's more important than life to the enemy? As Zhou walked back, he pondered over this question. The hermit is dead? Immortal asked as he looked down at Cave Era in the League of Defender. I'm incompetent. Please punish me, said Cave Era with her head lowered. Your Excellency, this matter can't be blamed on Cave Era and Hermit. Who would have thought that Wasp King Wei Gu, whose hands are stained with blood and is almost despised by the entire Federation, is actually a man who can make Bikuni become Buddha? Blood Shaman said. That's because the hermit doesn't know how to use people, Yusuji now said. Blood Shaman frowned slightly. He wanted to say something, but Cave Era spoke first. I was indeed negligent in this battle. A defeat is a defeat. There's no excuse. I'll take responsibility. Xian just sat there, not moving from start to finish like a lifeless statue of a god. After everyone quietened down, Xian slowly said, How is the reconstruction of Tong Tian Tower going? Yusuji now answered, As there are too many resources needed, and some of the resources that were previously expended don't have any extra backups, the progress is very slow now. Many of the materials can only wait. It's estimated that it will take about 4 months to recover to its previous progress. If we only build the Sky Ascension platform, how long will it take? Xian asked again. As we were planning to build the Sky Ascension platform at the end, the materials for the Sky Ascension platform are still in the warehouse. They haven't been damaged. If we start building it now, we can build the Sky Ascension platform in about 2 months. However, without the main body of the Sky Ascension platform, there's no way to contact the dimension. It's useless even if we have the Sky Ascension platform, right? Yusuji now said after some thought. I want to see the complete Sky Ascension platform in a month, said Xian. Yusuji now immediately felt a little stumped, but Xian's words were probably not something she could refute. Therefore, she said, If that's the case, I need the Alliance's full support. Cave Era, Blood Shaman, from now on, help now build the Sky Ascension platform with all your might. All the resources in the Alliance will be provided to Now first, said Xian. Yes, Your Excellency. Cave Era and Blood Shaman answered at the same time. Your Excellency, do you want to use the Sky Ascension platform to contact the dimension and think of a way to deal with Zhou and the family? Blood Shaman asked. Xian said indifferently. In this era, all the heroes are rising. The 6 families are definitely not weak. The Federation has the Hui family internally and the Holy Spirit Association externally. Human Emperor, the Bandit King, and Luoyang's and family are all threats to us. However, these aren't important. What's really important is the Venus Dimensional Zone. As long as we can become first and obtain a Venus Companion Beast, these threats will be nothing. Your Excellency, do you mean to use the dimensional power to barge into the Venus Dimensional Zone again? Blood Shaman immediately understood. Xian's attention had never been focused on Zhou or Luoyang's and family. He was looking at the long term. Since we want to succeed, we have to pay the price. Be it on Earth or in the dimension, it's the same logic, Xian said indifferently. In a month, we have to build the Sky Ascension platform. Yes, Your Excellency, Yusuji now and company replied. Zhou, what are you doing sitting there? Tian was feeling terrible. She hadn't eaten sweets in days. In the past, Joan would often get people to buy some sweets to eat. She could bargain for the remaining sweets to enjoy. However, Joan had been sitting there in a daze for the past few days. He didn't even eat, much less get people to buy sweets to eat. I'm thinking about something, Joan answered. What are you thinking about? Tian pressed. You ghosts don't understand those things, Joan said. How do you know I don't understand? Let me tell you, there's nothing I don't know, Tian said angrily. Joan ignored her. He couldn't tell Tian that he was thinking of killing someone, right? Tian was God. To say that he wanted to kill someone in front of God and make the other party suffer a fate worse than death was something Joan would do unless he was crazy. I don't care. I want to eat cake, pudding, milk tea. This wasn't the first time Tian had exposed herself. She was already a little desperate. Joan looked at the exasperated Tian and seemed to think of something. His eyes gradually lit up as he sized her up. What do you want? Tian was a little frightened by Joan's gaze. She took 2 steps back and asked Joan warily, if you contracted a disease that would kill you just by eating something sweet, would you still eat something like cake? Joan asked Tian. I won't get sick, Tian said. I'm talking about what if. What if I don't get sick? This is just an analogy. What if you get such a disease? Without what if, it's impossible for me to get sick. Joan felt a little uncomfortable being stifled by Tian. He couldn't say his original thoughts. It was like a fishbone stuck in his throat. He couldn't swallow it or spit out. Chapter 1372. This uncomfortable feeling gave Joan a new idea. That's right. The so-called killing of the heart doesn't have to make the other party suffer a fate worse than death. On a grander scale, killing of the heart is to make the person wish they were dead. On a smaller scale, as long as it makes the enemy feel terrible, it can also be said to be killing the heart. The so-called killing of the heart is actually pointing at the weakness of the other party's character. In other words, what I need to do is to see through the weakness of the other party's character. However, it's easy to find flaws in a move because the move is there. I can study a way to crack it at any time. However, how can I know if an enemy I'm not familiar with has a weakness in character? Joan fell into deep thought again. Tian saw that Joan seemed to be in a daze again. He had his head lowered in a daze, his eyes unfocused. She turned around and left the yard gloomily. She couldn't help but want to go out for some sweets. Young master specially instructed me to buy this for you. Eat it while it's hot. Just as Tian walked out, she saw Sheng walk over with a box in his hand. This is Cloud Store's plum blossom cake. Tian's eyes lit up when she saw the box clearly. She nearly drooled. The last time she ate with Joan and Madame Lawn, she had seen Joan eat such plum blossom cakes. Back then, she had been drooling, but Joan hadn't left any for her, leaving her depressed for an entire day. Why should I want his things? Tian turned her head to the side as though she was disdainful, but her eyes couldn't help but glance at the box of plum blossom cakes. Young master said that you like it, so he got me to buy it for you. Since you don't like it, I'll throw it away. And Sheng turned around to leave. Don't. It's such a waste to throw it away. Although I really don't like plum blossom cakes. I can't waste food. Just accept it. Tian said with a red face. Then I'll leave it to you. And Sheng handed the box to Tian before turning to leave. After Sheng left, Tian found an empty garden. She opened the box and took a sniff. The sweet smell immediately filled her face with bliss. Soon, Tian's mouth was filled with plum blossom cakes. Her cheeks were round, and there were many red bean stains on the corner of her mouth. As she ate, she muttered to herself, that baddie Joan isn't too bad at times. He's not hopeless. Oh, how fragrant. Joan was still pondering over the problem. He wasn't in the mood to instruct Sheng to prepare it. However, Sheng had the opportunity to prepare the plum blossom cakes for Tian. If it's someone I'm familiar with, I'll know their personality, and I might even be able to discover their weaknesses. That's not right. No matter how close someone is, they'll have their own secrets. Most people won't show their weakest side to others. let alone strangers, Zhou thought hard. Since it's impossible to learn the other party's human weakness from their words, I can only rely on observation. But what kind of observation can point straight to the heart? Zhou felt that it was impossible to figure it out just by thinking about it. He had to observe it with his own eyes to make any discoveries. Who are you going to observe? Zhou thought for a moment. Although Tian followed him all day and could be observed at any time, Tian was like a blank sheet of paper. Everything was written on her face. He didn't need to observe to know what she was thinking. And it didn't seem good to observe the weaknesses of people close to them. I have to find an enemy, Zhou muttered to himself before listing the list in his mind. The first to bear the brunt was naturally the League of Defender. Zhou felt that it was time for him to make a trip to the League of Defender. Others were afraid of the many Terra Grey Guardians of the League of Defender, but Zhou wasn't afraid at all. With the minor heavenly cycle stellar array, Zhou wasn't afraid of being besieged. As long as he was given enough time in advance to set up the minor heavenly cycle star array, it would be useless no matter how many Terra Grey Guardians there were unless someone could crack the minor heavenly cycle star array. Of course, it would be different if a Calamity Grade appeared. Fortunately, the League of Defender did not have a Calamity Grade now. It seemed like the dimension couldn't create Calamity Grade Guardians. The Guardians that were teleported to Earth were at the Terra Grade at most. Since they can come to Luoyang, why can't I go to the League of Defender? Even if I can't defeat the League of Defender, it's good to see how strong they are. Zhou didn't plan on killing anyone this time. Firstly, killing wasn't beneficial to him. It couldn't advance Slaughterer. The key was to figure out how to find the weaknesses of human nature. Secondly, with Tian by his side, if he really started a massacre, Tian might not be able to take it any further, and Heaven, who represented the kindness and integrity, destroyed him. Zhou wouldn't even have time to cry. Zhou told Ensheng about his wish to go to the League of Defender. He originally imagined that Ensheng would persuade him not to take the risk. To his surprise, Ensheng's eyes lit up as he said, "You should have done this a long time ago. Young Master One, I've long wanted to say that you are good in everything, but you're too kind. A tooth for a tooth, blood for blood. If others slap us, we have to slap them back. That's how it feels. You have to continue with the matter regarding Tian-E." Zhou thought for a moment and said, "I want to sell Tian-E to the League of Defender. At this point, is that still possible?" Ensheng felt that it probably wouldn't be easy to sell Tian-E to the League of Defender. Where there's a will, there's a way. Just continue preparing. There's no need to deliberately contact the League of Defender. First contact others who are interested in Tian-E and talk about it. Zhou already had a plan. All right, I know what to do. Ensheng understood what Zhou meant. After arranging the matters in Luoyang, Zhou set off for the headquarters of the League of Defender. Tian naturally wouldn't let Zhou off. She continued following by his side, as though she wouldn't give up until she found a reason to kill him. Zhou sat on the Earth Elemental Beast's back and took out his phone. He opened Yang City, hoping to see what was inside that even Tian, a goddess, wasn't willing to enter. Yang City was an Earth city. The blood-colored avatar pushed open the door and entered. The camera turned, and many buildings made of mud and what appeared on the phone screen. They looked very old and backward. This city wasn't small. Strangely, Zhou didn't see a single living dimensional creature. The entire Yang City was dead silent like a ghost city. What's that? Zhou sized up the buildings in Yang City and quickly discovered something strange. Chapter 1373. Zhou realized that something was amiss with the buildings here. Although they looked like they had adobe walls and wooden roofs from the outside, they didn't look quite right. However, Zhou saw a huge pillar that looked like a leg bone in the nearest room. It was definitely not made of wood or mud. Zhou carefully observed again and realized that not only were the pillars in the room made of bones, but even the beams and ridges were made of bones. Perhaps it should be said that the entire roof was a huge backbone and rib cage, while the pillars were leg bones. The interior of the room was completely supported by the bones of unknown exotic beasts. Zhou's heart stirred as he hurriedly looked at the nearby buildings and realized that it was as he had expected. The skeletons of various exotic beasts could be seen in the buildings of various sizes. Or rather, these buildings were built according to the skeletons of those exotic beasts. The smaller the bones, the smaller the buildings. Some houses were only half the height of a person and looked like models. However, the bones inside were not fake at all. The huge house was like a palace, and the skeleton inside was astonishingly huge. It was hard to imagine what kind of terrifying beast it was when it was still alive. According to the different skeletons, every building had a different shape. Some were long, some were short, some were tall, and some were short. It looked very strange. The more Zhou looked at it, the more he felt that something was amiss. This place shouldn't be called a city, but a group of temples. Of course, the temples here weren't dedicated to gods, but to the bones of those mutated beasts. Inside the temple are the bones of mutated beasts, then these mud walls and wooden roofs. Zhou looked at the reddish-yellow mud walls and couldn't help but think of something. Don't tell me those mud bricks were mixed with the blood of exotic beasts. The more Zhou thought about it, the more terrified he became. If this Yang city was really built with the blood of mutated beasts mixed with soil, then how much blood would it take? There was something else that puzzled Zhou. It was said that no one who entered Yang city had left alive, but up to now, he hadn't encountered any danger. Since he was already here, he naturally couldn't return empty-handed. Zhou summoned Tyrant Behemoth and made it head for a blood-bone temple. He wanted to see if he could destroy it or see if there was anything hidden inside. Tyrant Behemoth ferociously pounced at a small blood-bone temple. The highest point of the building only reached Tyrant Behemoth's waist. Tyrant Behemoth activated absolute strength and punched the wooden roof of the blood-bone temple. Boom! Before Tyrant Behemoth's fist could hit the wooden top, an evil light erupted from the blood-bone temple. A black blood-like flame soared into the sky and blasted Tyrant Behemoth's massive body into the air. The black-red flames hovered above the blood-bone temple and turned into a black-red blood shadow. It looked like a big turtle, but its claws were like those of a tiger or wolf. Its head was like that of a bird, and its tail was like that of a crocodile. It even had a scorpion stinger. The blood shadow looked demonic and evil, but it also gave off an extremely powerful pressure. Tyrant Behemoth's body was in midair when the blood shadow leaped up as though it had vanished. When it appeared again, it had already grabbed Tyrant Behemoth's body and torn it into two. Terrorgrade. Zhou was alarmed. The Bloodbone Temple he got Tyrant Behemoth to attack was already an inconspicuous one. He never expected it to have a Terrorgrade existence hidden inside. If this wasn't a coincidence with so many Bloodbone Temples in Yang City, even if only half of them were at the Terrorgrade, it would be shocking enough. After the Blood Shadow killed Tyrant Behemoth, it turned its gaze to the blood-colored avatar. Zhou didn't wait for it to attack again as he summoned Banana Fairy. Banana Fairy sat on a banana leaf that resembled a boat. Her clothes fluttered without any wind, making her look like a fairy that had descended to the mortal world. The Blood Shadow went berserk again as it transformed into a sanguine beam that swept toward Zhou. Banana Fairy's red lips parted slightly as she spat out a mouthful of Grandine wind. The Blood Shadow moved against the wind as its speed slowed down. Furthermore, frost formed on its body. Finally, its entire body was wrapped in ice as it was sent flying. Bam! The frozen Blood Shadow slammed into the wall of another Bloodbone Temple, but it failed to break through the mud wall. Instead, it caused the Bloodbone Temple to glow brightly as a Blood Shadow rushed out. This time, the Blood Shadow that rushed out looked like a huge snake, but its body was as huge as a dragon's. However, it didn't have claws. Instead, it had a single horn on its head. The moment the Blood Shadow-like snake appeared, it revealed a ferocious glint. It opened its mouth and spewed out a river that resembled blood. Like a flash flood, it surged towards Zhou and company. Another Terrorgrade. Zhou was pleasantly surprised. Any creature that came out of the Bloodbone Temple looked like it was at the Terrorgrade. With so many Bloodbone Temples here, there were at least 200 to 300 Terrorgrade creatures. To Zhou, This was a holy land for grinding companion eggs and dimensional crystals. But speaking of which, it was unlikely that there weren't any calamity-grade creatures in such a terrifying place. If he encountered a calamity-grade creature, without the help of a lucky heavenly robe, Zhou Wen's means of resistance would be very limited. After the Crimson Shadow exotic beast slammed into the wall, the layer of ice around it shattered. Its body was not affected much, but its movements seemed a little stiff. It got up from the ground and shook the ice off its body. It opened its bird-like mouth and let out a strange scream. It formed a sound loop that quickly spread out. Banana Fairy was clearly a little angry. She jumped down from the banana leaf and flew in front of Zhou Wen. She grabbed the banana fan formed by the banana leaf and fanned the two monsters. A terrifying grand wind swept out, freezing the torrent like blood water. Even the sound loop froze in the air. With Banana Fairy as the starting point, it instantly formed a large fan-shaped frozen area. The two blood shadow-like terror-grade creatures were frozen into ice sculptures and blown away. Their bodies slammed into the wall of the Bloodbone Temple. This time, they failed to shatter the ice around them, but they failed to destroy the temple either. Boom, boom, boom. Touched by Banana Fairy's fan, the hundreds of Bloodbone temples in the frozen area emitted terrifying black blood flames. Terrifying black-red blood shadows rushed out of the temples. Every black-red blood shadow emitted a terrifying aura. Without a doubt, they were definitely at the terror grade. Zhou Wen looked around and didn't see a creature below the terror grade. He was even more surprised. What's going on with Yang City? Why are there so many terror grade creatures? Chapter 1374. More than 100 fiendish and ghost-like terror-grade creatures swept over as though they had a blood feud with Zhou Wen and wished they could devour him alive. Zhou Wen summoned the dragon in prison armor and wore it. He quickly teleported, but he only managed to dodge a portion of the attacks. Many of them still landed on him. Fortunately, absolute defense was indeed powerful. Not only did it block many of the fatal attacks, but it also reflected damage, sending a few demon-like blood shadows flying back. Banana Fairy fanned the banana fan in her hand and used the chaos wind to form countless tornadoes, sending all the forces and blood shadows that approached her flying. However, there was a bird-shaped blood shadow that went against the wind. It wasn't afraid of Banana Fairy's chaos wind at all. It tore through the tornadoes that filled the sky and came close to Banana Fairy. With a spread of its wings, sanguine beams shot at Banana Fairy like a rain of arrows. Banana Fairy rode the wind and used the banana fan in her hand as a weapon. She blocked all the sanguine beams that approached her and fought the blood shadow-like bird. However, she had clearly met her nemesis. The giant bird seemed to have the innate ability to stop the wind. Be it the solar wind, the Grandine wind, or the chaos wind, they would immediately stop once they reached the giant bird. Zhou Wen relied on the dragon-imprisoned armor's defensive ability to constantly set up the minor heavenly cycle stellar array. However, before the invisible sword beams could stabilize, they were shattered by the overwhelming power that surged over. He was unable to form a sword array. Seeing that the sword array couldn't be set up, Zhou Wen was about to risk his life when he heard a strange cry that sounded like a cow or a dragon. Before he could react, the blood-colored avatar's eardrums ruptured before its entire body exploded, turning into a bloody mist. A calamity-grade creature. Zhou Wen was somewhat depressed. It wasn't surprising that there was a calamity-grade creature in Yang City, but he wasn't even able to see what it was before being killed by the sound. He was truly displeased. He wanted to enter again, but he was notified that he could only enter after 24 hours. Since he couldn't enter, Zhou Wen used his memories to search for information online. Soon, he discovered that the blood shadows he saw in Yang City were extremely similar to some of the creatures in the classic of mountains and seas. For example, the blood shadow that looked like a turtle and a bird at the very beginning was very similar to the revolving tortoise in the classic of mountains and seas. The other blood shadows also had the shadow of the mutated beasts in the classic of mountains and seas. Could it be that the blood-bone temples in Yang City were built with the bones of mutated beasts from the classic of mountains and seas? The more Zhou thought about it, the more he felt that he was right. Back then, Yu the Great conquered the flood and split open the mountains and rivers along the way. He killed countless strange beasts of the Great Lake. Yu the Great was probably the only one who was qualified to build such a city. After figuring this out, Zhou was alarmed and delighted. He was delighted that he would definitely gain a lot from having such a treasure land to grind terror-grade companion beasts and dimensional crystals in the future. What shocked him was that if Yang City also had a calamity grade, it would not be easy to defend Luoyang. Isn't there a peaceful place where I can game in peace? Zhou sighed before immersing himself in grinding dungeons. Unfortunately, there were many places Zhou wanted to grind, but he didn't have the ability to clear them. For example, Venus Dungeons and Chess Mountain. Zhou could grind for a period of time, but he would basically die later on. Zhou had previously attempted to kill the Ant Lord Guardian, but he was still killed. The growth of Ant City's Guardian was probably at the Calamity grade. It seemed to be even faster than Zhou. Once, Zhou really didn't have any dungeons to grind, so he ran to Mount Laojun. After entering Mount Laojun's Golden Peak, he saw an immortal crane that ignored him. However, Zhou wasn't here for sightseeing, so he naturally couldn't just take a look. He went up to kill the immortal cranes, but he was killed on the spot with a single wing. The game screen instantly turned black. This can't continue. I have to think of a way to kill a Calamity grade. As long as I kill it enough times, a Calamity grade companion beast will drop. With a Calamity grade companion beast, everything will be easy. Zhou really wanted to count on Truth Listener, but ever since the last time, Truth Listener had been on him in the form of an earring. He couldn't summon it no matter what. Zhou planned on thinking of a way to kill a Calamity grade in-game after this trip to the League of Defender. From the looks of it, the Calamity grade he had the most hope of killing was the one on Venus. That Calamity grade's attack was indeed very strong. The 7th strike was almost a sure kill. However, his weakness was also very obvious. He only had single target attacks. Also, his defense was definitely not strong, and his melee combat ability was lacking. Otherwise, he wouldn't have remained hidden. Up to now, no one had seen what he looked like. As long as he could deal with his bullets and then find him, killing him probably wouldn't be difficult. Now, Zhou's infinite space circulation skill was almost done. The progress was very smooth. He believed that it wouldn't be long before he could withstand Calamity-grade bullets. When the time came, he would have the confidence to kill that Calamity creature. Tian was rather curious about everything on Earth. She found everything new and interesting, so she didn't feel bored. It wasn't easy for him to finally arrive near the League of Defender. Zhou tried his best to hide his whereabouts and planned on quietly approaching the League of Defender to set up his minor heavenly cycle star array. However, with Tian by his side, it wasn't that easy for him to hide his tracks. Shall we play a game? Zhou thought for a moment and said to Tian, I'm not a child. Why should I play a game? Tian asked again, what game do you want to play? Let's play hide and seek. Both of us will hide our tracks. Whoever is discovered first will lose, Zhou said. Tian rolled her eyes at him. You want to do something bad in secret and are afraid of being discovered, right? You can even tell me that. All right, I can only tell you the truth. I'm actually here to search for treasure, Zhou said to Tian in a low voice. What treasure? Tian's eyes lit up as though she was interested. In the city over there's a group of bad guys named the 40 Bandits. They burn, kill, and plunder everywhere. They have collected many treasures and hidden them somewhere in the city. I came here to find the treasures of the 40 Bandits and then distribute them to good people in need, Zhou said in all seriousness. You want to take it for yourself, right? Tian seemed to see through Zhou's thoughts at a glance. That's not important. What's important is to punish those bad guys. Zhou wore a righteous look as though he was the current Justice Bao. Seeing that Tian was still hesitating, Zhou hurriedly added, with so many treasures, even if most of them are distributed to good people in need, the remaining 0 1% is enough to buy a few plum blossom cake shops. Chapter 1375. Zhou Wen and Tian Tian secretly arrived at the headquarters of the League of Defender. Under Zhou Wen's coaxing, Tian Tian was tempted. She hid her figure and followed Zhou Wen to the headquarters of the League of Defender. Zhou Wen still needed to hide along the way, but Tian Tian was very relaxed. As long as she didn't want anyone to see her, no one could see her. How strange. Why isn't Tian Tian's strength suppressed on Earth? Tian Tian's abilities were so powerful that Zhou Wen was puzzled. Logically speaking, this shouldn't be the case. Calamity-grade beings were suppressed on Earth. If Tian Tian was really an apocalypse-grade big shot, the suppression should be even greater. However, no matter how Zhou Wen looked at it, Tian Tian didn't look like she was suppressed by the rules. The headquarters of the League of Defender was very large. It was already considered a city. Many humans who had contracted guardians could be seen coming and going here. Zhou Wen's minor heavenly cycle stellar array wasn't strong enough to envelop such a large city, so he could only enter the core area first. He originally wanted to use the invisibility cloak to sneak in, but he felt that it wouldn't work. After all, the invisibility cloak was only at the mythical stage. There were many Terragrade guardians here, so it was difficult to guarantee that no one could see him. After some thought, Zhou Wen summoned demonic neonate. Neonate called Grim Demon out. With a thought, the demonic sword in demonic neonate's arms automatically unsheathed and Grim Demon flew out. Grim Demon, you should be able to transform into guardian armor and possess me, right? Zhou Wen looked at Grim Demon and asked uncertainly. Typical guardians could transform into armor, but Grim Demon had never transformed into armor. He was always inside the demonic sword, so Zhou Wen wasn't sure. Yes, but you haven't contracted me. You can't use my strength. Grim Demon said smugly. Why? You need to borrow my strength after encountering something you can't resolve? If you had known this would happen, you wouldn't have done it in the first place. If you had contracted me back then, of course, I wouldn't have thought much of you. Cut the crap. Just transform into armor and attach yourself to me. Zhou Wen glared at him. Grim Demon naturally didn't care if Zhou Wen glared at him, but when he looked back and saw demonic neonate glaring at him, he immediately cowered. He smiled obsequiously and said, Of course, I'm coming. With that said, Grim Demon transformed into armor and enveloped Zhou Wen's body. A black armor enveloped Zhou Wen's body, making his slender and muscular body look even more explosive. It was as though he could shoot out like a cannonball with a single step. There's no problem then. Zhou Wen decided to swagger into the League of Defender. Letting demonic neonate return to him, Zhou Wen walked towards the entrance that looked like a highway toll booth with Tian Tian. It was the only way to enter the League of Defender. Unless Zhou Wen forcefully barged in, he could only walk there. As for teleporting in, Zhou Wen didn't believe that with Cave Era and GU around, they would allow anyone to teleport into the League of Defenders headquarters. As there were many humans who had contracted guardians entering and leaving the exit, Zhou Wen felt that he was wearing a genuine guardian armor, so there shouldn't be much of a problem. Did you see that? You could think of a way to solve everything. You don't have to use force. Didn't I easily sneak in? You still have a lot to learn. Zhou Wen walked among the guardians, but no one paid any attention to him. There were people wearing guardian armor everywhere, so Zhou Wen was inconspicuous. Therefore, he happily preached to Tian Tian. However, just as he walked through the entrance, he heard an ear-piercing alarm. Instantly, the surrounding guardians looked at him. The guardians in charge of the guards also came over and surrounded Zhou Wen. Where's your entry card? One of the guards asked Zhou Wen with an unfriendly expression. Zhou Wen lamented inwardly. He never expected the League of Defender to have such high-tech stuff. He felt depressed. You guardians, why are you playing with such high-tech stuff? There's actually something like an entry card. Tian Tian held back her laughter until her face turned red. However, she couldn't hold it in and laughed out loud. However, no matter how much she laughed, apart from Zhou Wen, the others didn't react at all. It was as though they couldn't see her at all. Zhou had no choice. There was no way he could get an entry card. Since he had already been exposed, he planned on rushing in. Just as Zhou was about to take action, he heard a person squeeze out from the crowd beside him. As he squeezed over, he said, "Sorry, I have his entry card. I kept it for him previously, but I forgot to return it to him when I came back." As the person spoke, he stuffed the card into Zhou hand. Zhou caught the card and the siren immediately stopped. "Be careful next time. Don't randomly place the entry card. If something goes wrong, you won't even know how you die." The leading guard lectured Zhou and the person when he saw that there was nothing wrong with their entry cards. "Sorry," the person apologized. "All right, go in. Don't delay others from entering." Only then did the guard let them in. Zhou followed the person in. When they arrived at a place with fewer people and no one noticed them, Zhou approached the person and lowered his voice. He asked in puzzlement, "Jiang Yin, why are you here?" The person who had helped Zhou out was none other than Jiang Yin, one of Wang Mingyuan's students when Zhou was studying with him. Jiang Yin said, "I've contracted a guardian, so I'm naturally considered a member of the League of Defender. I'm now doing some idle work at the headquarters. As for you, you are one of the great enemies of the League of Defender. Why did you come here instead of staying in Luoyang? Thankfully, you were here. If not for you, I would have been in trouble." Zhou was telling the truth. Although he wasn't afraid of the League of Defender, and it wasn't difficult for him to rush out, if he was discovered in advance, he wouldn't be able to set up the minor heavenly cycle star array in advance. It would also make the League of Defender wary. It wouldn't be that easy to attack again. "You're my junior brother after all. I can't just watch you be in danger, right?" Jiang Yin said with a smile. "No matter what you're doing here, you have to be careful. There are so many Terragrade Guardians here that you can't imagine. If anything happens, it won't be easy to escape." "I don't plan on fighting those Guardians to the death," Zhou said to Jiang Yin. "What do you do in the League of Defender? Will you fight if we encounter an enemy attack?" "I'm not a guard. I'm just doing some clerical work. Under normal circumstances, I don't have to fight," Jiang Yin said. "That's good. When I fight them later, don't come out. Think of a way to leave this place. It's best if you apply for leave in advance." Zhou exhorted. "Don't worry. I'll hide far away. What do you want to do? Don't tell me you really think you can shake the League of Defender alone?" Jiang Yin asked curiously. "Why not? I want to turn the League of Defender upside down with my own strength and smash that Lord Immortal's nest," Zhou said with a smile. Chapter 1376. "This really sounds like something you would do." Jiang Yin laughed. "However, you still have to be careful. That immortal's strength is extraordinary, and she has so many helpers. It won't be easy to deal with her. You don't have to worry about that. Even if I can't beat her, I can run. As for you, you helped me out today. Won't they find out about you in the future? Also, will there be a problem with the card you gave me?" Zhou frowned. "Don't worry. That card is anonymous. It won't be that easy for them to find out about me. Even if they do, no one can do anything to me without actual evidence. After all, I'm Cave Ira's younger brother," Jiang Yin said. "You're Cave Ira's younger brother? By blood?" Zhou widened his eyes. "By blood," Jiang Yin said with a smile. Zhou thought to himself that it was a close shave. Thankfully, he didn't have the chance to kill Cave Ira. Otherwise, he would have formed a grudge with Jiang Yin. Upon seeing Zhou's expression, Jiang Yin seemed to guess what he was thinking. He said to Zhou, "She's my sister after all. If there's no deep grudge, let her live if you meet her in the future." After a pause, Jiang Yin smiled and said, "If it were anyone else, I definitely wouldn't make such a request. However, you're different. You aren't someone who likes killing, but you have the ability to do that." "All right." Zhou nodded and didn't say anything else. "It's been a long time. I wanted to chat with you more, but the time and place aren't right. Let's talk about it in the future." Jiang Yin looked up and pointed in a direction. "If you encounter a perilous situation, run in that direction. Perhaps there's a way out. What's over there?" Zhou also looked in that direction, but he didn't see anything. It wasn't the center of the city either. "It won't work if I say it out loud. If you don't need to take that step, it's useless even if you know." If you need to take that step, you will naturally know when the time comes. With that said, Jiangyan pressed his hand on Zhou Wen's shoulder and said seriously, "You aren't suitable for killing. The previous you is more like you. I also want to game quietly every day, but this world doesn't leave me even a tiny piece of pure land," Zhou Wen said helplessly. "That's true. The world is unpredictable. Who could be independent? I'm leaving. Be careful." Jiang Yin put down his hand and turned to leave. "I'll go later." Zhou Wen wanted to say something, but was interrupted by Jiang Yin. "Don't tell me anything. I don't want to know, at least not now." Jiang Yin left without looking back. Zhou Wen shrugged. He hadn't planned on revealing his plan to begin with. He only wanted to tell Jiang Yin not to approach the area where he had set up the sword array. "Where is the treasure you mentioned?" Tian Tian could not help but ask. She had scanned the area for a while, but did not find any treasure. If it was so easy to find, it wouldn't be called a treasure. "Follow me." Zhou Wen led Tian Tian towards the center of the League of Defender. As he walked, he secretly set up the minor heavenly cycle stellar array. After Jiang Yin separated from Zhou Wen, he didn't head for the central area of the headquarters. Instead, he left the headquarters and headed for the Skyspan Tower. Just as he was about to reach the Skyspan Tower, Jiang Yin summoned the guardian armor and put it on. At the same time, he extended his hand, and a cloak-like robe appeared in his hand. He draped the robe over his shoulder, and a mask appeared in his other hand at some point in time. Although he was already protected by the visor, Jiang Yin still wore the mask on his face. Finally, he wore the cloak-like hat. After doing all of this, Jiang Yin walked toward the Skyspan Tower that was still under construction. Lord Immortal, when the guardian guarding the area saw Jiang Yin, he immediately lowered his head and bowed respectfully. Zhou Wen probably never expected Jiang Yin to be an immortal. He had just said in front of Jiang Yin that he wanted to destroy the immortal's lair. "Where are Shangshan and Cave Era?" Jiang Yin asked. "Lord Immortal, Shangshan and Cave Era are supervising on the 7th floor of the Skyspan Tower. Lord Blood Shaman is also there," the guard answered. Jiang Yin nodded slightly before walking towards the Skyspan Tower. Zhou Wen walked around the League of Defenders headquarters and set up a sword array, but he soon realized that there weren't as many high-level guardians as he had imagined. Although the League of Defender had suffered heavy losses the last time and had lost the Skyspan Tower's summoning ability, preventing it from summoning guardians to Earth. But even so, it wasn't to the extent of not seeing a single Terragray guardian after walking for half a day, right? Strange. There doesn't seem to be any ambushes. Why do I see guardians that aren't high level? Where did those guardians go? Zhou Wen used Truth Listener to listen carefully for a while and realized that there were no high-level guardians nearby. This was already the most central area of the headquarters. Zhou Wen thought for a while before his eyes lit up. "I know. The League of Defender must be rebuilding the Skyspan Tower. Apart from the Skyspan Tower, there shouldn't be any other huge project that can make the League of Defender send so many high-level guardians. I wonder if the Skyspan Tower is still where it used to be." Zhou Wen only knew where the Skyspan Tower used to be. However, according to Ensheng, the compressed acceleration essence energy bullet that had depleted the family's accumulated reserves had completely destroyed the Skyspan Tower. It was almost impossible to repair it. Back then, it had taken quite a number of years to build the Skyspan Tower. Coupled with the addition of many materials, it was no longer easy to find them. It would probably take at least 10 years to rebuild the Skyspan Tower. If they really went to build the Skyspan Tower, it means that the reconstruction of the Skyspan Tower definitely won't take that much time. Otherwise, it would be impossible for them to invest so much manpower. Zhou Wen knew very well. The operation of the League of Defender itself also requires a lot of manpower. It's okay to temporarily transfer so many high-level guardians over. If they were to build the Tower of Babel there for 8 to 10 years, then the League of Defender itself would almost be useless. There was only one possibility for such a situation to occur. The Skyspan Tower could be repaired in a very short period of time. At least a portion of it could be repaired, allowing the Skyspan Tower to play some role. No, I have to go to the Skyspan Tower to take a look. Otherwise, it's meaningless even if I destroy their headquarters. Zhou gave up his previous plan and headed in the direction of the old Skyspan Tower. Now, Zhou only hoped that they were repairing the Skyspan Tower's foundation. If they were to rebuild the Skyspan Tower in another place, he might not be able to find the new Skyspan Tower. What are you doing? Aren't you going to find treasures here? Tian asked in puzzlement when she saw Zhou walk out of the city. I thought a place. Perhaps those fellows hid the treasures there, Zhou said as he walked in the direction of the Skyspan Tower. When Zhou saw the Skyspan Tower being repaired from afar, he knew that his guess was right. Chapter 1377. My Lord. Blood Shaman, Yusuji now, and Cave Era immediately bowed when they saw a mortal walk over. Jiang Yin passed by the three of them and walked to the fence. He looked up at a pillar in the middle of the tower. The pillar was made of metal and crystal. Although it was erected in the middle of the tower, its current height had already exceeded the completed 7th floor of the tower. Jiang Yin stood by the fence on the 7th floor. He had to look up at the sky ascension platform to barely see its peak. My lord, according to the current progress, it should be completed in another 20 days, Yusuji now said from behind. It's too late, Jiang Yin muttered to himself. My lord, if we have another 20 days, it will only take 27 days. It's less than a month, Yusuji now said in puzzlement. Jiang Yin didn't explain as he calmly said, all of you can leave. Guard the tower outside, and don't let anyone approach this place. The three of them were alarmed as Blood Shaman hurriedly asked, My lord, what happened? Jiang Yin didn't explain as he looked at the sky ascension platform and said indifferently, Go, just guard it well. Yes. With Jiang Yin saying that, Yusuji now and company didn't dare ask any more questions. They left the tower together. Before walking down the 7th floor, Cave Era looked at Jiang Yin as though she wanted to say something, but she didn't say it in the end. She followed Blood Shaman and company down the tower. Although Jiang Yin didn't say anything, they knew that something must have happened. Otherwise, the immortal wouldn't have said that. Therefore, they immediately gathered all the guardians of Heaven's tower and began setting up defenses around it. After all the people who had built the tower left, Jiang Yin walked to the foot of the huge heavenly pillar. He walked along the steps that coiled around a stone pillar and walked toward the top of the Heaven Ascension platform. Only a third of the Sky Ascension platform was completed. The highest point was still under construction, but when Jiang Yin arrived at the highest point of the Sky Ascension platform, he could already see his surroundings. There's too little time. Although it's difficult to ascend to the heavens in one step, I have to give it a try. Jiang Yin looked up at the void. On the forehead of the guardian armor on his body was a mysterious crystal that resembled a vertical eye. It emitted a strange light. The crystal that looked like an eye seemed to be an endless abyss. Any light that fell on it would be absorbed, but it itself emitted a faint light. The light was like a tentacle, and when the light touched it, it was like a hair-thin tentacle had pierced into the void. The unfinished pillar of the Heaven Ascension platform beneath Jiang Yan's feet came into contact with the tentacle-like light. The crystals embedded in the metal that resembled patterns gradually lit up. As the Heaven Ascension platform lit up, the crystal on Jiang Yan's forehead that resembled an eye turned darker and deeper. The tentacle-like light rays also increased in number. They spread out like countless transparent strands of hair, filling the void and extending into the unknown. The light rays flickered with strange streams of light from time to time, like cables that transmitted signals. The more intense the light from the Heaven Ascension platform, the stronger the light streams on the light rays. As for Jiang Yin, he seemed to be enduring immense pain. His body trembled involuntarily, and his eyes were bloodshot. Even the capillaries under his skin began to rupture. Blood Shaman and the others, who were guarding outside the tower, were alarmed when they saw the Heaven Ascension platform glow brightly, but the top seemed to be enveloped in darkness. The Heaven Ascension platform is only a third complete. Its effects are greatly reduced. Isn't it too risky for Lord Immortal to use it to contact the dimension at this moment? Blood Shaman said in alarm. Obtaining contact with the dimension requires a huge price of energy. The Heaven Ascension Tower itself is an energy-gathering device, and the Heaven Ascension platform is like a signal amplifier. Even without the Heaven Ascension Tower's energy-gathering effect, as long as one has enough energy, they can use the Heaven Ascension platform's signal amplification ability to contact the dimension. However, even if there's an amplification effect, it requires extremely powerful energy to succeed. Now, there's only a third of the amplification effect, or even lower. It's hard to say if the signal can be sent into the dimension. If something goes wrong and the energy isn't sent out and there's a backlash, Lord Immortal will be in danger, Yusuji now said worriedly. Cave Era seemed to have long guessed what Jiang Yin was up to. At that moment, she was the calmest person. Lord Immortal naturally has his plans for daring to do this. We should guard the Heaven Ascension Tower well, and not let anyone disturb him to prevent all our efforts from going to waste. Cave Era knew that what Jiang Yin had said previously wasn't without reason. Yusuji now and Blood Shaman nodded slightly and increased their vigilance. At the same time, they informed headquarters to transfer the high-level guardian stationed at headquarters over. Even if the League of Defenders headquarters was flattened, nothing could happen here. On the Heaven Ascension platform, the guardian armor on Jiang Yan's body had already begun to crack. Due to the terrifying power that seeped through the cracks, his skin rapidly turned to ash. His originally crystalline skin instantly turned to dust and scattered with the spatial fluctuations. The Heaven Ascension platform had yet to be built. It wasn't as simple as having a third of its effects. An incomplete Heaven Ascension platform was also extremely harmful to the user. Jiang Yin ignored his disintegrating body and continued staring at the void that had been penetrated by the light. Cracks appeared on the crystal at the forehead of the guardian armor. This was an adverse effect caused by the direct impact of the Heaven Ascension platform's amplification effect. Please, it's almost done. Hold on a little longer, Jiang Yin prayed silently. However, the cracks on the crystal continued to increase. Soon, they covered the entire crystal. The crystal was like a glass ball that had been heated with fire and then soaked in cold water. Countless cracks crisscrossed each other. With just a little more force, it would instantly disintegrate. Just a little more. Just a little more. Jiang Yin stared intently at the void. His armor had cracked, and the exposed parts of his body had already turned to dust, revealing his white bones. However, he still didn't notice anything. Suddenly, a strange light spread out from the spot where the light beam pierced through, forming a humanoid figure made of light. It was as though a god that couldn't be looked at by humans had descended. Jiang Yin, is this the answer you're giving me? The figure looked down coldly at the half-completed Heaven Ascension Tower and the Heaven Ascension platform as it spoke unhappily. I've encountered some trouble and need help, Jiang Yin said. I've already given you enough help. If I need to resolve everything myself, why would I need you? Are you telling me that I need a new spokesperson in the human world? The figure said coldly. Chapter 1378. I believe in your judgment and know what you can do. Even if you change to another spokesperson, they won't be able to do better than me, Jiang Yin said in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing without any fear. The Rubik's Cube is ranked second last. The Tower of Babel has been destroyed. Even the Federation government isn't under your control. Is this what you can do? The figure said disdainfully. How difficult is it to control the Federation government? But what's the use of controlling the Federation government? What we really need to control are the 6 families. Even the Holy Temple hasn't been able to completely control the 6 families after so many years, much less me, who has only been in charge of the League of Defender for a few years. After a pause, Jiang Yin continued. The Rubik's Cube's current ranking doesn't mean anything. If I want to, I could be ranked in the top 3 now, but so what? My goal is to be first. Aren't you the same? Without first place, it's useless no matter how high the ranking is. Therefore, I need more time to observe. Of course, if you're willing to give me powerful help, I believe it won't be difficult for me to rush to first place now. As for the destruction of the Tower of Babel, it was indeed my negligence. However, from the fact that the Tower of Babel could be destroyed, you should be able to understand what kind of enemy I'm facing. You should have seen human experts like Human Emperor and Thief King through the Rubik's Cube. However, it's very difficult for a Terrorgrade power to fight such human experts. It's not that I don't want to do things, but I'm really lacking in strength. What else do you want? A Calamity Grade Guardian? If I could directly send a Calamity Grade Guardian to Earth, what would I need you for? Even if I gave it to a pig, it would be able to wipe out all of humanity, the figure said coldly. If that's what you think, please wait a moment. You can decide if you want to change your spokesperson after you're done. Jiang Yin wasn't affected by the figure's emotions as he remained calm. What are you looking at? The figure asked with a frown. A human, my opponent, Jiang Yin answered. Human Emperor or Thief King. You want me to help you deal with them? This is what you should do. Otherwise, why would I need you? The figure said indifferently. Neither. Jiang Yin cast his gaze outside the tower. At that moment, there seemed to be a strange change happening outside the tower. After taking a look, Jiang Yin continued, do whatever you can. I can deal with one human emperor, and I can think of a way to deal with another thief king. But what if there are more and more such humans? Don't you think that the help you've given them is not as effective as you think it is in front of such a human? Are you kidding me? How many humans like the human emperor and the thief king can you find among you humans? The light shadow said with displeasure. I don't know how many there are, but one is already here. Jiang Yin looked into the distance and said calmly. The figure couldn't help but look in the direction of Jiang Yin's gaze. Indeed, he saw something flying over from afar. Upon closer inspection, one would immediately discover that a plantain leaf the size of a small boat was slowly gliding in the sky. It was as if the sky and the water were one color, and the boat was sailing in the sky. At the stern of the boat, a beautiful girl in a gauze dress who looked like a fairy was waving her sleeves like a boatman rowing the boat. A young man stood quietly at the bow of the boat, staring at the unfinished tower. Isn't that human the one who relied on luck and equipment to clear the Venus dimensional zone? Don't tell me that you can't even deal with such a person, and you still want me to help you? If that's the case, there's no value in your existence. The figure recognized Zhou Wen and snorted coldly. There's no rush. Take a look, Jiang Yin said. Upon realizing Zhou Wen's appearance, Blood Shaman, Cave Era, and Yusuji Nao's hearts tightened. However, when they saw that Zhou Wen was alone and that the girl carrying him was a companion beast, they heaved a sigh of relief. Zhou Wen, you actually dare come here? Cave Era stared at Zhou Wen and said through gritted teeth. With the hermit killed, Zhou Wen could be considered a mortal enemy of the League of Defender. Cave Era wished she could skin him alive. Zhou Wen smiled and didn't say a word. He stood on the banana leaf and observed Cave Era's expression, hoping to deduce her thoughts. The thoughts that Truth Listener could hear had to be extremely intense psychological fluctuations. If it wasn't for the emotional ups and downs, it was almost impossible for Truth Listener to hear the thoughts. Furthermore, even if he could hear it, it was only an ability. What Zhou Wen needed wasn't a pure ability, but his keen perception and the ability to control the enemy's mental state. It wasn't enough to know what the other party was thinking. Therefore, if Zhou Wen wanted to reach the realm of killing, he still had to rely on himself. As he observed Cave Era's words and actions and the subtle expressions on her face, Zhou Wen discovered many things that he had never noticed before. It turned out that a person's emotions weren't what he thought. Although the face had the most rich expressions, body language was more rich than a person's expression when looking at a person's emotions. Apart from anger, it was difficult to see any other emotions on Cave Era's face. However, he could decipher more things from her body language. For example, Zhou Wen noticed that although Cave Era was expressing her anger, her legs were in a folded posture. This wasn't a sign of attacking. At the very least, her posture wasn't conducive to attacking. From this, it could be inferred that Cave Era subconsciously felt some fear towards Zhou Wen. Of course, this was a detail that could be seen by a more meticulous person. It wasn't difficult for Zhou to see through it, but it wasn't that easy to go further and perfectly interpret her inner thoughts from her body language. Furthermore, Zhou didn't know if this was the right path. However, no matter what, it was a good beginning. With a goal, regardless of whether the path he took was right or not, the scenery along the way was a gain. Seeing that Zhou didn't say a word and only stood on the banana leaf that resembled a boat, looking down at her with a teasing expression, she couldn't help but be furious. Shoot him down. This place doesn't allow an outsider to be impudent. After the dozens of Terrorgrade guardians gathered nearby received the order, they began gathering their strength to shoot Zhou down from the sky. What should I do to make my opponent feel a fear that's even more terrifying than death? With a thought from Zhou, invisible sword beams appeared. They flickered like stars that filled the sky. Instantly, they filled the nearby space, enveloping the entire area around the sky-reaching tower. Chapter 1379. It was much easier for Zhou to think about how to defeat the enemy in the most efficient way than to think about how to make others feel fear. In essence, Zhou was a pacifist. If he hadn't been born in such an era, he wouldn't even be willing to kill a chicken, much less kill someone. However, this was how times were. Heroes were created by the times. Many times, people who could become heroes might not be people who wanted to become heroes. All right, let's start with the basics. Zhou really couldn't think of how to make the enemy feel a fear worse than death. He decided to start with the simplest method. With a thought from Zhou, the stars in the heavenly cycle moved in unison. Invisible star-like sword beams descended in a frenzy. Zhou had come so late because he had spent a lot of time condensing invisible sword beams to set up the minor heavenly cycle stellar array. The universe was infinite, and so were the stars. It was the same for the minor heavenly cycle stellar array. The more invisible sword beams that formed the minor heavenly cycle stellar array, the stronger it was. There was no excess, nor was there any saying that it couldn't be controlled. However, compared to the true major heavenly cycle stellar array, the minor heavenly cycle stellar array still had a flaw. The true minor heavenly cycle stellar array could automatically evolve and reassemble. In other words, all the shattered powers in the major heavenly cycle stellar array would automatically reassemble and be used in battle again. However, the minor heavenly cycle stellar array couldn't do so. Once the invisible sword beams were shattered, there was no way for them to reassemble themselves. Zhou had to condense them again. In comparison, the minor heavenly cycle stellar array also had its advantages. The major heavenly cycle stellar array would absorb all energy and reassemble itself, but the minor heavenly cycle stellar array didn't. As for the protection constellation array, which was the foundation of the minor heavenly cycle stellar array, it could absorb a large amount of energy and provide it to Zhou. Bam! Bam! The invisible sword beams that were as dense as rain kept falling, directly attacking all the guardians, including the Skyspan Tower. The invisible sword beams were everywhere. The guardians who were prepared to attack Zhou suddenly realized that each of them had to face the invisible sword beams that were like a flood. They couldn't divert their attention. With such a large-scale attack, everyone believed that Zhou definitely wouldn't be able to last long. They even believed that there would only be one round of invisible sword beams. Such essence energy expenditure wasn't something a Terrorgrade could withstand. From their point of view, it was already very unbelievable that Zhou could release an invisible sword beam. Every guardian used all their strength to shatter the invisible sword beams that were charging at them. They were determined to fight with their lives. They wanted to break through the sword formation and charge at Zhou. But soon, they realized that their thoughts were too simple. The formless sword chi continued to fall down without any gaps. It was as though there was no end to it. After receiving a few rounds of invisible sword beams, some guardians could not take it anymore. Blood spewed out of their mouths as the guardian armor on their bodies was pierced by the invisible sword beams. Once they lost the ability to resist, they were constantly bombarded by the invisible sword chi and nailed to the ground. Cave Era wanted to use her time acceleration ability to pass through the invisible sword beams to attack Zhou 1, but she was alarmed to discover that the invisible sword beams were so dense that there were almost no gaps. Even if there were gaps, those narrow gaps weren't enough to accommodate her body. Zhou to leave, they sect, time one, and to they have forced. The group of guardians was like a drowning person caught in a torrent, panicking and helpless. This was even when Zhou didn't have any intention of killing them. Otherwise, more than half of these Terragray guardians would have been killed. Zhou didn't kill him out of kindness. He only wanted to observe his emotions to improve Slaughterer. Just because he didn't kill people didn't mean he didn't do anything else. While attacking the guardians, large amounts of invisible sword energy bombarded the sky-reaching tower and the Sky Ascension platform. In just a moment, the newly rebuilt 7-story sky-split tower was nailed with dense, invisible sword chi. Rumble. Under the bombardment of the invisible sword chi, the 7-story Tong Tian tower was finally unable to withstand it and collapsed. The earth quaked, and the mountains shook as if it was the end of the world. The Terragray guardians that should have been terrifying were filled with fear. There had never been a human as terrifying as Zhou. He had single-handedly blasted apart the Tower of Babel and suppressed dozens of Terragray guardians. At that moment, Zhou was no longer human in their eyes. Impossible. That fellow is definitely not a pure human. Blood Shaman's body was riddled with wounds as he was horrified. He could seal companion beasts, but Zhou didn't use any companion beasts. Just the power of the invisible sword chi had already obtained an overwhelming advantage. Amidst the invisible sword chi's torrent, Blood Shaman felt like a small boat in a stormy sea. He could be crushed at any moment. Is a pure human really that strong after advancing? Yusuji Nao's body was like a phantom. The invisible sword chi passed through her body, failing to injure her. The power that Great Sky Fien's terror transformation gave her allowed her to ignore the invisible sword chi. However, at that moment, Yusuji Nao was extremely shocked. She didn't dare approach Zhou. More and more guardians collapsed in the sword formation. A large area of the Tower of Babel had already collapsed. Even the foundation was about to be flattened. The last time the Tower of Babel was blasted apart, it didn't feel much as the time was too short. However, this time, it was blasted apart by an invisible sword chi. The visual impact and shock to those who witnessed this scene were far greater than the previous time. In their eyes, the current Zhou was like a terrifying devil, not a human. The only thing that was not affected by the invisible sword chi was the Heaven Ascension platform. All the invisible sword chi that bombarded the Heaven Ascension platform seemed to have collided with a mysterious power. Before they could even touch the pillars of the Heaven Ascension platform, they all exploded. The glowing figure on the Sky Ascension platform was also shocked. Heavenly Cycle Stellar Array? No, it's a little different. Strange. Without a Calamity Gray domain power, how can he set up such a large-scale Heavenly Cycle Stellar Array? It's impossible for essence energy to keep up with the consumption. Even dimensional creatures born from essence energy can't have such abundant essence energy. The figure seemed to understand what Jiang Yin was saying. It wasn't that Jiang Yin wasn't good enough, but that the enemy was just too terrifying. Thinking of Human Emperor, King of Thieves, and Zhou 1, it wasn't easy for Jiang Yin to last until now with such humans as enemies with the League of Defender. I believe you should understand my situation, right? I really need support, Jiang Yin said. Calamity Gray Guardians can't enter Earth. Even if they enter, their strength will be greatly suppressed. They won't be of any use, the figure said after some thought. If you don't mind, I'm willing to use myself as a vessel to welcome you into this world and sweep away the filth of the human world, Jiang Yin said sincerely as he placed his hand on his chest and bent down slightly. Chapter 1380. Do you know that if I were to descend upon your body would definitely be severely injured? It might even be irreversible damage, the figure said as it stared at Jiang Yan. I know, Jiang Yan said calmly. The power of an existence like you far exceeds the tolerance of Earth's laws. It's naturally not something my body can withstand. It's inevitable that it will cause damage. Since you know that, why do you still want me to use your body to descend? The figure was clearly suspicious of Jiang Yan's request. However, Jiang Yan smiled and said, So what? Compared to this little sacrifice, I can gain much more, can't I? Oh, what do you want to obtain? The figure asked. My guardian, the Sky Immortal, is a guardian created by the Immortal's genes. As for you, you are a powerful existence of the Immortals. If you descend upon me, with your strength, you should be able to advance the Sky Immortal to the Calamity grade in an extremely short period of time. After you leave, as the Sky Immortal's contractor, I will naturally have the strength of a Calamity grade. In comparison, that little injury is nothing, Jiang Yan said calmly. The figure stared at Jiang Yan for a while before saying, As expected of Wang Mingyuan's disciple, you're indeed a smart person. I can help you advance a Sky Immortal to the Calamity grade, but this is the last time I'll make an exception to help you. If you have similar problems in the future that you can't resolve, I'll consider changing a spokesperson. If I still can't dominate everything with the strength of a Calamity grade, there's no need for you to do anything. I'll just commit suicide, Jiang Yan said firmly. In that case, I'll use your body to temporarily descend upon Earth. Remember, my name is Perfect Sword Immortal. As he spoke, the figure slowly walked towards Jiang Yan, his gaze fixed on him. Although it was the Perfect Sword Immortal who took the initiative to borrow Jiang Yan's body, it was theoretically the Perfect Sword Immortal who had the absolute initiative. Furthermore, with the Perfect Sword Immortal's strength and realm, it was enough to suppress Jiang Yan. Even if Jiang Yan had ulterior motives, it would be difficult for him to do anything. However, the Perfect Sword Immortal was still very careful. If he discovered anything amiss, he would directly kill Jiang Yan. However, Jiang Yan didn't move at all. He spread out his arms like a fanatic who was wholeheartedly sacrificing himself. Without holding back, he presented his body completely in front of the Perfect Sword Immortal. Seeing that Jiang Yan didn't hold back at all, Perfect Sword Immortal felt relieved. The shadow formed by his body walked in front of Jiang Yan and overlapped with his body. As an immortal glow flowed, the Sky Immortal armor around Jiang Yan overflowed with immortal aura as it rapidly transformed. Dimensional creatures were suppressed by Earth's rules, but humans weren't within these rules. With Jiang Yan's body, the Perfect Sword Immortal had descended on Earth. Although Jiang Yan's body was too weak, making it difficult for him to unleash 100% of his combat strength, he could still unleash combat strength at the Calamity grade through the Sky Immortal armor. As the immortal glow flowed and the sword beam flowed like a river, Jiang Yan's gaze changed completely. It was completely different from his deep eyes. Replacing it was a gaze that was as sharp as a sword. Perfect Sword Immortal extended his palm and clenched his fingers as he muttered to himself. Jiang Yan is a tactful fellow. It's quite rare for him to offer his body without reservation. In comparison, his abilities aren't weak either. He can be considered a useful person. Human Emperor, Thief King, and Zhouwen are indeed quite powerful. I wonder where they came from. All of them aren't ordinary Terragrade creatures. It's indeed a little difficult for Jiang Yan to resolve the problem with such strength. However, it can help him advance from his Sky Immortal to the Calamity grade. Outside the tower, Zhouwen's sword formation constantly attacked. One guardian after another was struck down by the invisible sword beams. However, they weren't killed. They were only pierced by the invisible sword beams and nailed to the ground. Only 5 to 6 guardians were left resisting with all their might. Blood Shaman was covered in blood. His body had been pierced by many invisible sword beams, and his situation was the most tragic. The grotto world relied on the miraculous power of time. Although it wasn't injured, the situation wasn't looking good. Yusuji now rode the great Sky Fiend armor and passed through the numerous invisible sword beams. She circled behind Zhou and stabbed at his head like a ghost claw. Zhou moved and dodged Yusuji Nao's attack. After Yusuji Nao's strike, the subsequent attacks came one after another. Her movement technique was like a ghost, appearing and disappearing from time to time as she constantly appeared around Zhou. Her attacks could be said to be unpredictable. However, no matter how her attacks changed, she couldn't touch a single strand of Zhou's hair. Upon seeing this scene, the Guardians' hearts chilled. Only then did they recall that Zhou's heavenly robe could even dodge a calamity grade attack, much less Yusuji Nao, who was only at the terror grade. In fact, it was purely because of Zhou's superb movement technique that he had dodged all the attacks. It wasn't thanks to heavenly robe. Of course, it wasn't that heavenly robe didn't contribute at all. However, without Invincible Lucky Star, heavenly robe's dodging rate wasn't high. Most of the time, Zhou had to dodge it himself. Grotto World and the others didn't know about this. They only imagined that heavenly robe was still the same as before, able to dodge calamity grade attacks. They couldn't help but feel despair. The invisible sword beam with terrifying destructive power and heavenly robe, who could dodge any attack, made them unable to see any hope for the perfect and powerful Zhou. Zhou sensed that Slaughterer seemed to be shaken by his actions, but the trembling wasn't too great. It wasn't as intense as the last time Zhou comprehended the principle of killing and killing. Clearly, this method of intimidation wasn't very effective in advancing Slaughterer. Just as Zhou was thinking about how to improve further, he suddenly realized that the black hole on the Heaven Ascension platform had vanished. The light on the Heaven Ascension platform dimmed as a figure tore through the air. Zhou took a closer look and realized that the person who walked over was wearing a mask and a white robe. His attire was very similar to the Lord Immortal of the League of Defender he had seen before. The reason why it was very similar was that the Guardian armor on his body seemed somewhat different. Now, the Guardian armor emitted a golden immortal glow, making him look like an immortal that had walked out of the immortal clouds and glow. There seems to be something wrong with this fellow. Why do I feel different from before? With a thought from Zhou, a large number of invisible sword beams swept towards Perfect Sword Immortal like a tsunami. Although a lot of the invisible sword beams have been expended, the remaining invisible sword beams were still like a tidal wave. At that moment, they were attacking Perfect Sword Immortal with all their might. Its might was in no way inferior to the falling stars. Countless invisible sword beams rushed in front of Perfect Sword Immortal, but in the next second, something that alarmed Zhou happened. A strange force field rose from Perfect Sword Immortal's body. Within the force field, the invisible sword beams came to a standstill as though they had frozen in midair. Chapter 1381. Do you think you are worthy of using sword beams with that incomplete heavenly cycle stellar array? Perfect Sword Immortal walked toward Zhou step by step. As his body moved, the invisible sword beams moved again. However, this time, the invisible sword beams didn't charge at Perfect Sword Immortal. Instead, they turned around and aimed at Zhou. The sword beams that filled the sky surrounded Zhou. Calamity grade, Zhou was alarmed. Without any hesitation, he used the Singularity Universe's interstellar teleportation ability to leave this place. However, Zhou was surprised to discover that the resonance between the Singularity Universe and the stars seemed to be blocked. He couldn't sense the locations of the stars at all, so he naturally couldn't teleport out. Ignoring you. Even if Purple Star Lord comes personally, he won't be able to escape my Perfect Sword Immortal domain. Perfect Sword Immortal said coldly as he saw through what Zhou was up to. Calamity grade? Zhou didn't have the time to think, because the invisible sword beams that blotted out the sky had already descended. Although the invisible sword beams were condensed by Zhou himself, he had spent a lot of time slowly condensing them one by one. Now that they were descending together, the other Terragrade creatures couldn't withstand them, and neither could Zhou. Ignoring the fact that the heavenly robe on his body couldn't dodge 100%, even if it could, There was no space to dodge in such a dense, invisible sword beam. The so-called 100% dodge also required space to dodge. It wasn't true that he could dodge all attacks. Many thoughts flashed through his mind as he immediately made a decision. At such a moment, if he didn't immediately make a decision, he would probably die. At the instant the sword beams landed on him, Zhou figure suddenly vanished into thin air. He didn't retreat. Instead, he teleported behind Perfect Sword Immortal, pulled out bamboo blade, and stabbed at his back. After falling into a calamity gray domain, if he couldn't use interstellar teleportation to escape, the chances of escaping were almost zero. It wasn't like turning passivity into initiative. If he could catch his opponent off guard and make him reveal a flaw, Zhou could take the opportunity to use the Singularity Universe's teleportation to leave. Clang! Without turning his head, Perfect Sword Immortal flicked his finger and struck the bamboo blade's blade, bending it. The tip of the blade was about to stab into Zhou arm. Zhou felt like he couldn't hold the hilt in his palm. The force was extraordinarily powerful, completely exceeding the power of the Terrorgrade. Just as Zhou arm was about to snap from the force, he suddenly flung his arm and spun his arm and body along with the force. His body spun like a drill as he stabbed at Perfect Sword Immortal with bamboo blade. Dang! Perfect Sword Immortal flicked the tip of the saber again, causing Zhou to tremble again. His bones seemed to shatter. If Zhou's understanding of strength and sword techniques hadn't exceeded this level, he probably wouldn't have been able to withstand the two simple finger flicks. Gritting his teeth and brandishing his saber, Zhou spun like a spinning top. He used the momentum to teleport his saber and appeared beside Perfect Sword Immortal, slashing at his neck. Clang, 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 clang. Zhou's spinning figure was like a ghost as he pushed the heart-defying sword technique to its limits. He appeared in all directions around Perfect Sword Immortal, and his sword stance was even more unfathomable. However, every strike was easily repelled by Perfect Sword Immortal's flick of a finger. None of the strikes could touch Perfect Sword Immortal. Your sword techniques aren't bad. You have the right to be proud on Earth. Unfortunately, as my enemy, you are far inferior. Perfect Sword Immortal flicked his fingertip on the bamboo blade again. However, this time, his fingertip lit up like a firefly. Clang! When his fingertip collided with the saber, a light wave rapidly spread out like a wave. After the light wave, the bamboo blade that had followed Zhou for a long time instantly shattered into pieces. Zhou's body flew out like a cannonball. After slamming into the ground, he plowed open a ravine that was hundreds of meters long. Zhou spat out a mouthful of blood. Due to the high-speed friction, the heavenly robe on his body produced an extremely high temperature that was emitting hot smoke. The heavenly cycle, stellar formation, and lucky evasion are just external forces that I've used. They might be useful against trash, but they're useless against me. Perfect Sword Immortal wasn't in a hurry to chase after him. As he spoke, the invisible sword beams that Zhou condensed were under his control again as they swept over like a tidal wave. However, his words left Cave Era and company embarrassed. Their expressions didn't look too good. If it was useful against trash, wouldn't they be worse than trash when they were nearly killed by Zhou? Zhou endured the injuries on his body and leaped up from the ground. However, the sword beams that filled the sky had already charged over, giving him no chance to dodge. He used teleportation again, but this time, when he instantly appeared, Perfect Sword Immortal seemed to have already determined his landing spot. Countless sword beams were already there. The moment Zhou teleported out, several invisible sword beams were stuck in his body, immediately dyeing his heavenly robe red with blood. More invisible sword beams were already right in front of him as they tore through all directions. Without any hesitation, Zhou summoned the Chaos Egg. In an instant, the Chaos Egg was pierced like a hedgehog. The invisible sword beams constantly stabbed over, one after another, colliding with each other. Thankfully, the Chaos Egg's defense wasn't fake. It could even withstand the powers of time and space, allowing it to withstand the terrifying sword beams. This is really terrible. Why isn't there any movement from Tian Tian at all? Don't tell me she's really going to watch me die. Zhou crushed the invisible sword beams that pierced his body and took out a mythical dragon birth pill essence to swallow. The injuries on his body immediately healed at a discernible speed. In moments, his damaged organs had recovered, and his external injuries were almost healed. He's actually not dead. After all, the invisible sword beams struck the chaos egg and exploded. Perfect Sword Immortal realized that the strange ball hadn't been pierced through. He couldn't help but be surprised. However, the surprise only lasted for a moment. To Perfect Sword Immortal, the invisible sword beams that Zhou condensed were still too weak. It was just that there were a lot of them. From the point of view of a Terragrade, such a large number of invisible sword beams was terrifying, but in the eyes of Perfect Sword Immortal, it was nothing. Since you aren't dead yet, I'll let you witness what true sword beams are, Perfect Sword Immortal said as he raised his index and middle fingers and stabbed at the chaos egg. A purple sword chi formed at his fingertip. Like a purple rainbow, it pierced through the chaos egg and instantly collided with the chaos. Boom! The chaos egg was pushed back by the purple sword beam. After it slammed into the ground, the purple sword beam continued attacking, sending the chaos egg deep underground. The shockwave produced by the sword beam blasted apart the ground within thousands of meters. Cave Era and the other guardians had no choice but to retreat quickly. After the terrifying purple sword beam completely dissipated, a huge crater that was thousands of meters in diameter appeared on the ground. Even Cave Era and company were alarmed when they saw it. Chapter 1382. Zhou Chaos Egg had also undergone a test. Back then, it had been beaten like a ping-pong ball by a calamity grade, but it hadn't exploded. However, Perfect Sword Immortal's sword beam was truly ruthless. The might of the strike caused many solid essence energy crystals to form in the chaos egg, but it failed to shatter it. At the bottom of the crater, Zhou put away the chaos egg and summoned Earth Elemental Beast. He wanted to use Earth Elemental Beast's Earth Escape to escape. However, Earth Elemental Beast didn't escape far when it suddenly let out a tragic cry. Its body seemed to be penetrated by invisible swords. Zhou was alarmed as he immediately knew that it wasn't safe underground. He was still in the Calamity Domain, so Earth Elemental Beast probably couldn't escape. However, this way, Zhou roughly knew the range of Perfect Sword Immortal's domain. He had some confidence. Earth Elemental Beast was on the verge of death. All Zhou could do was order it to escape from the ground before immediately unsummoning it. Even so, he failed to save Earth Elemental Beast's life. The patterns on Earth Elemental Beast gradually faded before disappearing. Zhou couldn't sense its existence. F*CKU. Zhou gritted his teeth. Perfect Sword Immortal took a step forward and appeared above Zhou. He looked down at him and said, "You're actually not dead. You really surprised me. I won't die even if you die." Zhou teleported and arrived behind Perfect Sword Immortal. He swung his arm to slash. However, just as he raised his arm, Perfect Sword Immortal turned around and kicked him in the abdomen like a phantom, sending him flying. Cough! Cough! Blood spewed out of Zhou's mouth. The kick had severely injured him and nearly caused his stomach to explode. As it was too fast, Zhou failed to react in time. Sword beams flashed as Perfect Sword Immortal arrived in front of Zhou at an unbelievable speed. He grabbed Zhou's head and squeezed. The scene of Perfect Sword Immortal's head exploding didn't happen. His fingers sank into a white rubber-like substance. His fingers were originally grabbing Zhou, but now it was the Chaos Egg. Sword Immortal Perfection squeezed again, hoping to crush the Chaos Egg. However, he was surprised to discover that the Chaos Egg was soft and pliable. He couldn't crush it, but he managed to deform the Chaos Egg. I want to see how strong this ball's defense is. Sword Immortal Perfection exerted strength in his palm and held the Chaos Egg in his palm before throwing it into the air. In the instant he tossed it into the air, a purple lotus seemed to bloom in Sword Immortal Perfection's hand. If one were to take a closer look, they would discover that those were not lotuses, but rays of purple sword chi. The lotus-like purple sword beam stabbed at the Chaos Egg. Sword beams struck the Chaos Egg from different directions. As the sword beams came from different directions, the collision caused the Chaos Egg to hover in midair, unable to move at all. However, the sword beams struck it one after another. Bang! Bang! After being struck by several sword chi, the Chaos Egg shape distorted beyond recognition. It was very worrying that it would explode at any moment. However, no matter how the Chaos Egg distorted, there were a few times when it was like a balloon that had been pierced by a needle. It looked like it was about to explode, but it ultimately didn't. Cave Era and company were alarmed. In the past, Zhou had relied on his dodging ability to dodge calamity-grade bullets and help others ascend the rankings. They believed that Zhou was just lucky to have such a companion beast. However, this time, Zhou had relied on his own strength to withstand the continuous attacks of calamity grade. This wasn't as simple as luck. Cave Era and company asked themselves if they were in his shoes, they would probably have died on the spot after suffering a single sword beam. Back when the Metal Flower fought Yana, Zhou had also used the Chaos Egg. However, the fluctuations from the battle between the two calamity grades were too intense. The satellite hadn't been able to capture the Chaos Egg on the battlefield. Therefore, this was the first time Cave Era and company had seen the Chaos Egg's powerful defense. However, Zhou wasn't having it easy either. Sword Immortal Perfection's sword beams were too ferocious. Sword beams struck the Chaos Egg, condensing a large number of solid essence energy crystals inside. If this continued, Zhou would be buried alive by the solid essence energy crystals. No, I can't continue like this. I have to think of a solution. Zhou's mind raced, but the solutions he could think of were limited when facing a calamity grade. It wasn't that he didn't have anything that could fight a calamity grade. Truth Listener and Immortal Culling Sword had the power to fight a calamity grade. The problem was that he couldn't summon Truth Listener. Using Immortal Culling Sword required a large amount of essence energy as support. Using it once would almost make Zhou lose his combat strength. As for Sword Immortal Perfection strength, it was clearly not a problem that could be resolved with a single strike. Furthermore, Zhou had some concerns that prevented him from using Immortal Culling Sword. Previously, Sword Immortal Perfection had been able to control his invisible sword beams. Clearly, the other party was very proficient in sword elemental powers. If the Immortal Culling Sword was controlled by the other party when he used it, it would be too late for Zhou to cry. What should I do? What should I do? Where did that fellow, Tian go? Don't tell me she's really going to watch me die. Zhou was at his wit's end as he thought of Tian again. Zhou found it odd. Logically speaking, Tian shouldn't have let him die before figuring out the true situation of the candy box. However, Tian hadn't taken action yet, as though she had no intention of saving him. Although he didn't know what was going on, Zhou knew very well that he couldn't count on Tian. At that moment, Tian was in the sky with an anxious look on her face. She was indeed very powerful, but walking on Earth wasn't without taboos. There were some rules that she had to abide by. Now, she was in a dilemma as to whether she should break the rules to save Zhou. If she broke the rules, the impact on Earth would be immeasurable. Zhou didn't know any of this. Instead, he was somewhat glad that he had discovered that Tian wouldn't help him. If he really went to Chess Mountain and realized that Tian didn't care about his life, he would be in deep trouble. Although Perfect Sword Immortal was terrifying, he wasn't as terrifying as the arch in Zhou's heart. In fact, Zhou had seen a few calamity-grade existences like Perfect Sword Immortal. For example, Tsukuyami, Goddess Droughtba, Ant City's Guardian, and so on. They didn't feel weaker than Perfect Sword Immortal. The difference was that Tsukuyami hadn't fought Zhou seriously. Due to some reasons, Droughtba had shown mercy. That was why he felt that they weren't as strong as perfect Sword Immortal. As for Ant City's guardian, Zhou hadn't defeated her once. He didn't know how strong she was now, or how strong she would be in the future. Quickly think of a solution. I have to think of a solution. Zhou didn't have the time to let his imagination run wild. There were too many solid essence energy crystals, and he was about to fill the Chaos Egg. If this continued, the Chaos Egg would really explode. I'll suck. It's useless even if I suck. Even if my entire body is a sea of energy, how much can I suck? I'm afraid I'll die before the Chaos Egg. Die? From overeating? Wait, speaking of eating, it seems like I really have someone who can eat a lot. Zhou eyes suddenly lit up as he thought of Tyrant Behemoth. Chapter 1383. There was a very difficult technical problem to get Tyrant Behemoth to devour the solid essence energy crystals in the Chaos Egg. The last time the Chaos Egg was about to explode, Zhou had thought of this problem, but he ultimately chose to use the Immortal Culling Sword. This was because the Chaos Egg was only effective against Zhou himself. Furthermore, the space was extremely narrow. Even as Zhou's companion beast, it was unlikely for it to enter the Chaos Egg and directly devour the solid crystals inside. In the past, Zhou would first absorb the essence energy in the Chaos Egg before transferring it to his companion beast. This problem had never been resolved. However, it was different now. Although Zhou had yet to succeed in researching the infinite spatial circulation skill, the parts regarding spatial exchange and teleportation could resolve this problem. As long as Zhou left a spatial mark in Tyrant Behemoth's mouth, even if he didn't summon it, he could still constantly send the solid essence energy crystals into its mouth. The only problem was that Zhou still needed to summon Tyrant Behemoth once and leave a spatial mark in its mouth. Then, he could continuously teleport the solid essence energy crystals in. Of course, this spatial mark couldn't be used in exchange for Tyrant Behemoth's body. Thankfully, Zhou's current research results had resolved this problem. Zhou could use the mark itself as an exchange and didn't need to exchange the mark with it. The sword beams outside came one after another. It was clearly not an easy task to retrieve the Chaos Egg and summon Tyrant Behemoth once. He had to take the risk of dying. Thankfully, Zhou still had a delayed skill like space-time theft. He could use space-time theft to cast the skill before retrieving the Chaos Egg. If he cooperated well, he might be able to complete a series of actions at the same time before summoning the Chaos Egg. This way, he would be exposed to the outside world for a short period of time, and the risk would be minimized. Of course, this was only theory. Whether he could achieve a perfect connection was still a problem. I can only take a risk. Zhou wasn't too confident, but now that the solid crystals in the Chaos Egg were almost full, he had to take a gamble. Thankfully, the Lotus Flower sword beams that Perfect Sword Immortal had released were almost exhausted. Zhou planned on completing this risky action before the Lotus Flower sword beams were exhausted and Perfect Sword Immortal had yet to release a new skill. Now, all Zhou could do was silently pray that Perfect Sword Immortal wouldn't immediately release his other skills. Otherwise, he would have to face him head-on. Perfect Sword Immortal didn't do anything new as he kept looking at the Chaos Egg. Even an ordinary Calamity-grade super would find it difficult to withstand the Lotus Flower sword aura he released. Zhou, who was at the Terror grade, was actually able to last so long. Although he was using pure defensive abilities, it was already very shocking. It made him increasingly feel that he had to strengthen Jiangyan. Jiangyan's opponents were truly powerful. Zhou silently waited for the last sword beam to strike the Chaos Egg as his heart couldn't help but race. There was nervousness and excitement. This kind of extreme challenge in the face of danger made his somewhat numb nerves abnormally active. How fast is the reaction speed of a Calamity grade? 100 milliseconds? 10 milliseconds? Or 1 millisecond? Zhou didn't know how fast Perfect Sword Immortal's reaction was. Perhaps he wouldn't be able to use any skills after coming out before being blasted to death by perfect sword immortal sword beam. Therefore, Zhou needed to take everything into account and try his best to do it to the extreme. Boom! The last sword beam struck the chaos egg, causing it to distort and sway. It was like a balloon that was filled with water and had been struck by a fist. Thankfully, the chaos egg ultimately survived and wasn't blasted apart by the sword beam. Perfect sword immortal frowned slightly. Just as he was about to use a stronger attack to blast the chaos egg apart, he suddenly saw that the chaos egg had vanished as the sword beam vanished. When perfect sword immortal saw Zhou figure appear, he was about to launch an attack to eliminate him. As Jiang Yin was relatively weak, he was only at the epic stage. He couldn't withstand his possession for long, so he had to end the battle quickly. Otherwise, even if he won, Jiang Yin's body would be crippled. However, before perfect sword immortal could take action, he heard Zhou's voice almost at the same time the chaos egg vanished. Zhou roared, "Come on out, Earth's strongest companion beast." Perfect sword immortal wasn't interested in what Zhou had to say. He only wanted to kill Zhou immediately, but when he heard Zhou shout the words Earth's strongest companion beast, he subconsciously paused. He naturally knew that it was impossible for Zhou to have the strongest companion beast on Earth, but the entire dimension wanted the strongest companion beast on Earth. This name made him subconsciously want to see what companion beast Zhou had summoned. Boom! Tyrant Behemoth was summoned by Zhou. Its strong body landed on the ground, causing an earthquake-like quake. Zhou was overjoyed when he saw that perfect sword immortal didn't immediately attack. He immediately used the sky-stealing sun-swapping technique and shot the mark into Tyrant Behemoth's mouth. When perfect sword immortal saw Zhou's actions, he immediately realized that there was a problem. He instantly shot out a sword beam from his finger. The sword beam flashed and vanished, almost invisible. Zhou summoned Tyrant Behemoth back almost at the same time and used the Chaos Egg again. Even so, he was still a step too slow. Perfect Sword Immortal's sword beam stabbed into Zhou's heart before the Chaos Egg appeared. The Chaos Egg enveloped Zhou's body, but Zhou's chest was also penetrated by the sword beam. The sword beam looked like a purple ancient sword, and Zhou seemed to be surrounded by lightning. Zhou's heart was pierced, but he didn't feel any pain. Suddenly, Zhou felt an electric current pass through the sword beam, causing his entire body to twitch as though he was having an epileptic fit. He had actually been fooled by Zhou. This made Perfect Sword Immortal's expression turn cold. He stared at the Chaos Egg and said coldly, "The sword beam you are struck by is a heavenly tribulation sword. Although it won't kill you immediately, it will release 9 heavenly tribulation lightning bolts. The first lightning will destroy your body. The second lightning will slice your bones. The third lightning will end your life, and the fourth lightning will destroy your soul. Even an apocalyptic expert can't withstand the pain of the 9 heavenly tribulation lightning. If you come out now, you can die a quick death. If you continue hiding, I'm afraid your life will be worse than death." "At least I'm not dead," Zhou said through gritted teeth. He had already done his best, but he was still injured by Perfect Sword Immortal. This was the difference in strength that Zhou couldn't control. Thankfully, Perfect Sword Immortal didn't attack immediately, so he didn't have the time to explain other skills. All he could do was use his fastest heavenly tribulation sword. Otherwise, Zhou would have died long ago. At the end of the day, Zhou had fought for a chance of survival for himself. Just as he said, he wasn't dead yet. Chapter 1384. Zhou's forehead was covered in cold sweat as his face contorted from the pain. The lightning that surged out from the heavenly tribulation sword wasn't ordinary lightning. If it were ordinary lightning, it would at most electrocute a person to death. However, this lightning seemed to be able to penetrate deep into his cells, making Zhou feel as though his cells were being pierced by needles. The pain that seeped into his soul was indescribable. The so-called destruction by lightning didn't mean destroying the body in the traditional sense. Instead, It meant that the pain the body endured would cause a person to self-destruct. Ordinary people would probably commit suicide after being struck by lightning. Zhou didn't commit suicide. His body trembled as he gritted his teeth. However, as he circulated the Chaos Egg, he circulated the Human Emperor Sutra and continued using the sky-stealing sun-swapping technique to transfer a portion of the Chaos Egg's solid crystals to Tyrant Behemoth. Perfect Sword Immortal could still hear Zhou's tragic cries in the beginning, but later, he couldn't even hear his screams. He couldn't help but frown slightly. To be able to withstand the pain of the heavenly tribulation without even screaming, he has some backbone. Perfect Sword Immortal believed that Zhou would definitely die. Even a Terragrade with great perseverance could at most survive the first 3 tribulations. The 4th tribulation was almost certain death. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if Zhou was lucky and didn't die from the 4th tribulation, there were still the 5th, 6th, and 7 tribulations. Each tribulation was more terrifying than the last, and it was definitely not something a human could withstand. However, every tribulation would last for a period of time. Perfect Sword Immortal couldn't wait that long. Jiang Yan's body couldn't wait that long either. He naturally couldn't wait that long since he possessed Jiang Yan's body. Without any hesitation, Perfect Sword Immortal condensed another sword beam. A sword beam shot towards the Chaos Egg like a white rainbow, piercing through the sun. Boom! The Chaos Egg was drowned by the sword beam as though it had melted. The sword beam that resembled a pillar of light continued without end. As for the Chaos Egg in the sword beam, it was being pierced by the sword beam from all directions. From Perfect Sword Immortal's point of view, Zhou was suffering the ravages of the heavenly tribulation sword, so he definitely couldn't withstand the sword beam with his entire body. Furthermore, the sword beam had a very strong penetrative ability. Even a heavenly tribulation defensive skill wouldn't be able to withstand it for long. The Chaos Egg around Zhou would definitely be pierced through very quickly. When that happened, it would be time for Zhou to die. However, under the continuous impact of the sword beam, although the Chaos Egg was distorted beyond recognition, it didn't break. Inside the Chaos Egg, Zhou endured the pain brought by the heavenly tribulation and constantly passed the solid essence energy crystals to Tyrant Behemoth. A large number of solid essence energy crystals were devoured by Tyrant Behemoth. Of course, there were 2 prerequisites. First, Tyrant Behemoth was Zhou's companion beast. It was equivalent to a part of Zhou's body, so it could devour the solid essence energy crystals condensed by the Chaos Egg. Secondly, although Tyrant Behemoth was in a tattoo state, it was still inside the Chaos Egg. It couldn't satisfy these 2 prerequisites. Even if Zhou had the means to pull the wool over his eyes, he couldn't move the solid essence energy crystal out. Following the Perfect Sword Immortal's attack, a large amount of solid-state essence energy condensed, and its speed was several times faster than before. If Zhou hadn't teleported a large number of solid essence energy crystals to Tyrant Behemoth, the Chaos Egg would have long exploded. However, Zhou was still very worried. This was because after Tyrant Behemoth devoured a large number of solid essence energy crystals, the tattoo began to glow like a red-hot branding iron. Hold on. Zhou could only hold on. If he went out and risked his life, death was almost certain. However, Tyrant Behemoth was only at the mythical stage after all. It had yet to reach the legendary realm of devouring 1,000 mountains a day. As for the solid essence energy crystals it had eaten, in terms of energy, it wasn't as simple as 1 or 2 mountains. Just as Zhou was worried that Tyrant Behemoth would explode from the overload, Tyrant Behemoth's tattoo began to change. This fellow, is it evolving while eating? Zhou was pleasantly surprised to discover that Tyrant Behemoth had begun to evolve. Furthermore, it was a direct evolution. It didn't need the rebreeding process that ordinary companion beasts needed to evolve. As expected of the glutton behemoth, it's evolving while eating. It's too powerful. Zhou was ecstatic as he teleported more solid crystals over. He had no choice. Perfect Sword Immortal's attack was too powerful. If he didn't teleport the solid essence energy crystals out as soon as possible, the Chaos Egg would explode at any moment. Even with such constant teleportation, the essence energy crystals in the Chaos Egg still maintained their state of occupying most of the space. This was because the energy of the essence energy crystals was just too high level and pure. Only the mythical tyrant behemoth could complete its evolution in a short period of time because of the high purity and grade of essence energy. Tyrant Behemoth's tattoo had become somewhat indistinct. In the past, it was black, but now, it was the color of a black hole that absorbed all light. Even one's gaze was sucked in. It was impossible to see what Tyrant Behemoth's tattoo looked like. After completing its evolution, Tyrant Behemoth's appetite increased greatly. The solid essence energy crystals that Zhou, when teleported over, could no longer make Tyrant Behemoth glow and heat like before. This change made Zhou, who was enduring the pain of the heavenly tribulation, feel much better. Although the heavenly tribulation lightning made him feel very painful, Zhou's willpower was just too tenacious. Such pain couldn't waver his mind. Zhou reached out to pull out the heavenly tribulation sword from his chest, but when his palm touched the sword, it passed through as though the sword didn't exist. Instead, when his palm passed through the heavenly tribulation sword, the pain intensified several times. What the hell is this thing? Zhou circulated several powers, but he failed to produce any good effects. He could only rely on his willpower to resist it. 3 minutes later, the pain of the lightning piercing through his body suddenly vanished like a tide. Before Zhou could take a deep breath, lightning suddenly surged out from the heavenly tribulation sword. However, this time, it was different from before. The lightning didn't bring Zhou any pain. He didn't even feel any pain. However, in the next second, Zhou felt something worse than pain. It itched. The bone-piercing itch felt as though thousands of ants were crawling under his skin. It made Zhou's entire body tremble. Sometimes the pain could be endured, but the itch wasn't that easy to endure. The perfect Sword Immortal outside wasn't just surprised. His most destructive Great Destruction sword, Flash, still failed to crack the Chaos Egg. It's already time for the second Heavenly Tribulation. The current him shouldn't be able to focus. It's difficult for him to fight the Great Destruction sword Flash, right? Perfect Sword Immortal thought. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.